new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. And they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost Train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday morning. It's great to be here. There's loads to talk about. And we're asking the question, how do we fix the prison system? We're going to talk to Robert Jenrick in a few minutes' time. He's the Shadow Justice Secretary, really popular this week because of what he talked about in regard to fare dodgers. But the big story he has today is the front page of the Sunday Express. Armed jail staff to stop Islamist attacks. Jenrick calls for action over the prison terror threat. We'll be talking to a prison governor a bit later on who says it's a really bad idea to put guns and arms and even things like tasers into prisons. Robert Jenrick thinks it is a good idea. He's proposing it. What do you think? And more generally, how do we fix the prison system? We've had so many different attacks on different officers recently. We remember Axel Rudakubana, the Southport killer. He has been throwing boiling water over officers, others throwing boiling oil and stabbing prison officers. It's a really dangerous job. It's very badly paid, and we ask people to do it and give a huge level of commitment. So is Jenrick right? Tell us what your thoughts are on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss today, including the fact that Starmer has lost control. That is what some people say, as close to 1,200 migrants are crossing the channel in a single day. Also, we're going to have nuclear armed planes, apparently. That is something that's coming up in the Strategic Defence Review. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Sarah Pochin, who is the Reform UK MP, will tell us her view on all of that a little bit later on. Disposable vapes now banned. Was that the right decision? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts. We'll talk to someone later on who is a vape smoker. As I say, we'll talk to our former prison governor and a fraudster who made £500,000 selling fake Scottish-grown tea. Yes, really. You're going to want to hear that story and some of the detail of that story as well, which really is quite astonishing. In fact, I'm even going to read you a tiny bit right now about the CV of a fantasist, this guy who was marketing this Scottish-grown tea. He claimed, among other things, he was a multimillionaire, a polymer scientist, a former bomb disposal expert, and had invented the bag for life. Yes, we will talk about that a little bit later on. As always, I want lots of your thoughts on the show today. This is my show, but it's your show too. I want to make sure that you get your voice on the air and your thoughts out there. You think I'm wrong, you tell me why. 0344 499 1000. That's the main number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please. Tech up Dave will play them out. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss this morning between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, let's go straight to the debate desk, and Phil Dave is with me, the broadcaster. Great to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Peter. And let's get this out of the way straight away. Many happy returns of the day.
Thank you very much. I was actually given some chocolates earlier. Perhaps we'll have one of those a little bit later on. Maybe not chomping.
If I tell you what, if I start saying stuff that's annoying you, give me a chocolate and I won't be able to say very much.
That's a good strategy, actually.
Go.
Maxwell Marlowe, the political commentator, is here as well. Maybe given the logistics of me sitting across the desk from you, Maxwell, maybe you could stuff the cake or whatever it is in Phil's mouth to shut him up. Phil, of course, is not just a broadcaster, but our colleague here at Talk and the man who killed the biscuit breakdown. I'll just
wow,
leave
okay,
leave
that's
that.
the thanks I get for saying happy birthday.
Leave that note. Thank you, Phil. It's very, very kind of you. You're great, even though you hate fun. Right then, lots to discuss, including Starmer losing control as 1,200 migrants crossing the Channel in a single day. This is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. 1,000 migrants crossing the Channel in a single day, the largest influx this year. Overwhelmed Coast Guard force to call on fishing crews to help in rescues, and Tories and Reform UK branding the crossings as a day of shame for the government. Maxwell.
It is a total disgrace. I know the Tories are going to complain about it, but you know it all really started under them, didn't it? So this is the issue, right? It's that we've now got there's actually great photo in that piece of French border guards sat on the beach taking photos and smiling as these are going across.
I've only read it online. I haven't actually seen the picture. Let's see if we can find that and hold it up on the screen. This is whereabouts is this?
Maybe in there. I may have read it in the Times either.
Oh, okay.
But your listeners and viewers can check it up. It's baffling. But the French are totally complicit in it, right? What are they doing to crack down on the Calais camps? What are they doing to, deploy their own resources to stop these people from crossing? I think generally we are being invaded. It's absolutely baffling, and the government don't have a plan. Even though
they're going to smash the gangs, Maxwell.
Allegedly. Where's the evidence? I haven't seen a single thing. And
there is a gangmaster who's been in prison. He got a 25-year sentence recently, so there is some evidence.
And what a massive difference it's made.
It's a huge difference. I mean, a day of shame, and I just don't see this going anywhere until actually probably we start deporting people. I think that we got to that point where it was quite radical to say a couple of years ago, but now it just seems quite common sense. You start deporting people who are coming over using illegal channel crossings to take advantage of the British asylum system. It's crazy.
Phil?
I'm actually quite pleased that you've used the word invasion there, because I'm not convinced that enough people actually use that. It is exactly what it is. If you could imagine, sort of think back to sort of the times, I know none of us were around, but of, say, the World Wars. Could you imagine if sort of people who claim to be from countries other than maybe Germany or wherever it was, without people's knowledge potentially of where they were coming from, saying that they were trying to seek asylum, they're absolutely, sort of in desperate state, but funnily enough, they don't have the passport or any other legal documents on them. Funny that. However, you put that to one side. Could you just imagine during that wartime, the UK being so open to the idea of people coming into the country willy-nilly, putting them up in hotels, giving them lots of food at the expense of the taxpayers? It's as insane as it sounds. It is ridiculous. I'm sorry, like my family would have come over here in peril at one stage in their history, but at the same time we would have done it properly. Would not have done it by getting into a little dinghy and crossing and hoping for the best. What's worse is that now we actually sort of hear stories where those who are trying to come over legitimately potentially contribute to our economy and actually become hard-working taxpayers. They're the ones who are really struggling to get into the country now, and yet we see people enter illegally and they're fine, they're having a lovely time.
What do you think the level of, well, I think all three of us probably agree the level of illegal migration should be 0, but what do you think the level of legal migration should be, Maxwell? Do we need immigrants for our economy? And I'm talking about a net here. I'm not talking about saying absolutely nobody can come over. I'm talking about there are people who leave the country every year. And Nigel Farage talking this week saying that the birth rate needs to go up. He admits we need more people. He wants to do it in his own way. He wants to incentivise people. Maybe we'll talk in more depth a bit later on about the two-child benefit cap, which is a big political argument. But what is your thought on legal migration, Maxwell?
I mean, so part of the day job I work for the Adam Smith Institute, and there was for a long time...
That's a think tank in Westminster.
Which used to be really in favour of actually having open borders. Now, leadership's changed and we don't agree with that anymore. We've looked at the evidence, the data. There was a really good paper published last year by Tom Jones and David Cohen looking at the economic effects of what has essentially been mass open borders immigration, as Starmer called it, a great experiment. I think we need to be looking at currently about net zero migration, fundamentally, right? I think, you know, the terms often use Britain's full. Now, I don't think that's technically true. However, the amount of cost from immigration every year is
but
quite,
look at,
is
I
quite
mean,
small.
the point you make is an interesting one. I don't think, I mean, there is room for more people. Of course there are, but we don't have the houses. Look at, you know, we haven't built a reservoir since 1992, a major reservoir, and we've got 10 million more people in the country than we did in 1992. So I think we do, I mean, we physically, factually do have room for more people, but the point is that the infrastructure, the housing, the reservoirs, the schools, the hospitals, they're under so much strain.
And that's exactly it. Is so that unfortunately, people misconstrued the expression Britain is full. No, of course Britain's not full in terms of land mass, far from it. In fact, there's loads of room in terms of land mass, but it is exactly that. It is infrastructure. And when you hear these horror stories of people who are struggling, taxpayers, hard-working taxpayers, who are struggling to get the help and support they need on our National Health Service that we all pay for, and we pay an awful lot of money in the grand scheme of things for as well, they're struggling to get anything out of the health service. And yet we hear that there are people who sort of use the health service almost, if you like, sort of just they come over here for that alone. It's just totally and utterly unacceptable. Could you imagine, let's reverse this another way, look at it, it's again go to any other country in the world. Could you just imagine them paying for the thousands and thousands of people that we are paying for?
Well, I think, and I wonder what you both think of this, there would be a real shift in attitudes to legal migration. Nobody wants illegal migration. To legal migrants. If legal migrants were told to pay their way, and some of them do, and that's fine, but as you say, there's a lot of health tourism. I spoke to someone who's Canadian recently. She happens to have a British passport because her parents are British. We had her on the show a couple of weeks ago. The point she made was that she came here, she couldn't believe how many things she was entitled to. She'd paid not a penny into the tax system. She was already entitled to all sorts of things. Now, that's one element of the immigration system that's not perhaps talked about to a huge degree. But interestingly, if we said, right, you can come here as long as there is a job for you, as long as you will be contributing to the economy, as long as we build a few more homes, as long as you contribute to the health levy, which a lot of immigrants, legal immigrants, do pay. If there was a sense of fairness, if there was a sense that you're not getting anything you haven't paid for, I think attitudes to immigration would change dramatically in this country.
Well, I think that's a bit liberal elite, if I may say, Peter.
Really?
I think it's a bit liberal elite. I think genuinely, we've just done a focus group in Runcorn talking to what I think was the Chesham and Amersham of by-elections from last year. It's the fact that Britain's become unrecognisable, and I think fundamentally, for speaking to voters who aren't plugged into the Westminster system, who haven't worked in Whitehall and Westminster, they walk down the streets and they don't feel like they are in Britain anymore, the Britain they remember, and a lot of that is to do with culture fundamentally. So I don't even think it's a case of paying the way for a lot of these immigrants. It's genuinely, are they adapting to British culture? Can they be called British? Do they call themselves British?
Do you speak English?
I speak English. I mean, GB News, there was a very interesting thing with, I think, Ben Leo, a great presenter there, walking up and down, the most diverse streets in Britain, in Leicestershire, people who genuinely couldn't understand what he was saying and were walking in and out of these houses. That's not a fair system. It's not a sensible system. Speaking to your point, this wouldn't have happened 30 years ago, but now it just seems to be.
But immigration
normal.
was different 30 years
exactly.
ago, wasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, well, I was going to say
immigrants who came were, and I've spoken to numerous people on this programme who say, look, I came to this country, learned English, started contributing taxation. engage with my community, engage with my neighbours, and are, you know, fully integrated. But as Maxwell correctly says, there's so many people who just don't do that.
No, totally not, and it's because it's too easy to not do it, and that's what the problem is. So when you have, for example, the translation services within the NHS and other official organisations, if we're saying, well, I tell you what, you know, if you need to go to the doctors, we'll give you everything you need to know, and we'll pay for the translator, by the way, that's absolutely fine, don't worry. Of course they're not going to learn English, why would they? You know, if you go to another country and you were told that at your most, shall we say, vulnerable moment, that you didn't have to learn the language. In fact, actually, if you lived there instead, you could just carry on talking English to someone who's not necessarily got English as their first language, but it's fine, we'll pay for it. Of course they're going to do that. Why wouldn't they? I actually don't blame them. I blame successive governments for not making it stricter to say that actually if you don't learn English, you are going to be the one to suffer in this country.
You go to Spain, you go to a hospital in Spain, there's not an English translator there.
Absolutely, of course there's not. I mean, to be fair, most of the medical staff in Spain do speak English, but it's not the point. Especially when you consider modern technology in this day and age, where an awful lot of modern technology actually offers translation services for free. Let's not forget that, okay? That's what we could be integrating. But I think in terms of sort of what you're saying in terms of actual integration and stuff like that, the way that we could sort of make this country slightly less attractive to come to is straight away stopping all benefits for those who enter illegally. Completely and utterly, not one thing. Not a hotel, not gift vouchers, not £30.
What would you do with people who arrive illegally?
If they thought that that was the case, they weren't going to get anything, they'd think very carefully about coming here first. But I personally, I would intel them. I'd make sure they were actually sort of put into some sort of secure area that is ultimately designed to process people. Now, we all know we could have an argument about whether or not people are processed quickly enough. We know they're not, that's fine, but it doesn't mean we should compromise national security just because the government can't pull their fingers out and get on with processing people. But in terms
hold on, just hold on a second. There's a lot of Phil Dave in this conversation. I want a little bit more Maxwell Marlowe. We'll come back to you, Phil, but Maxwell, what are your perspectives?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's really interesting when I get on the tube, right, and I see adverts with terms that I've never recognised before in my entire life, you know, targeted at a kind of foreign-born population who, you know, are not going to be picking up English slang or picking up the English language. There's a great account on X, formerly Twitter, called UK Aesthetics. I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't.
But it is just snapshots of Britain today, different cities. You wouldn't be able to tell it's Britain, right? There are different areas of London, Manchester, Leeds.
You must follow that account. Really,
it's quite baffling. But it doesn't. There's no commentary. That, you know, there's no tagline to it. It's just photos of Britain. And I've submitted stuff that I've seen around. That it just doesn't look like the UK you would remember. I think that's what is driving a lot of this, change in attitudes to immigration. And I'm going to use the word. You said, secure zone. I say deport, because actually, if you actually do have, the incentive to deport people, which is to, win votes, for example. We're seeing this with the turn to reform at the moment. If you have that incentive for politicians, removing people who come here illegally and are not welcome, then I think people stop coming.
Please don't misunderstand me. Secure zone with a view to deporting as possible, but still.
We're going to talk more about that. We'll get your view as well, 0344 499 1000. Not just on immigration and the fact that the Prime Minister has lost control. That's what the Sunday Telegraph is saying. 1,000 migrants crossing the Channel in a single day, the largest influx this year. We'll also talk about Robert Jenrick's plan. We'll talk to him a little bit later on in the programme. We thought it was going to be a bit earlier. It's changed to slightly later, but we will talk to Robert Jenrick. His plan is that prison officers, he's a Shadow Justice Secretary, prison officers must be armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to prevent their kidnap or murder by Islamist terrorists, I should say, not Islamic terrorists, Islamist terrorists. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss, including with Maxwell and Phil, in just a minute.
Dogs are racist, according to the Welsh Labour Party. Deary me. Sorry. I can't help it. Apparently, breaking news. The economy has grown by 0.1%. I'm sorry, between July and September, according to the Office for National Statistics.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We're asking the question this morning, how do we fix the prison system? Robert Jenrick, who we'll be talking to a little bit later on, he is the Shadow Justice Secretary. He has a plan. He wants to arm prison guards at the last resort and in the prisons where we have terrorists. Places like Her Majesty's Prison Frankland, where there was that, His Majesty's Prison Frankland, where they had that absolutely horrendous attack on 3 prison officers, boiling oil and stabbing, a makeshift stabbing equipment or knife or whatever you want to say, was stabbed with a piece of actually a kitchen tray. So why do they have access to that? I mean, they improvise, these terrorists and people who attack prison officers, they improvise in all sorts of ways. People sharpen toothbrushes to stab people and to use them as weapons. That is what happens. Rachel has been in touch and says, regarding the prison service, before arming prison guards, can we try some basic common sense solutions first? Namely, stop employing women as prison guards in men's prisons. We frequently hear that women can't compete with men in sport due to physical strength differences, so it's madness to employ women to deal with violent male criminals in prison. We need to stop lowering standards to attract DEI hires. We also need to value this work more than we do and offer better paying conditions in an effort to attract the best candidates, ideally ex-military personnel. Rachel, I think there's quite a lot in that. You're definitely going to want to hear in about 20 minutes' time from Vanessa Frake. She was in charge of security at Wormwood Scrubs Prison, and she obviously is a woman. She was a prison governor and someone I must say I would never mess with, and I mean, she was clearly a very, very good prison officer. In fact, she's written a brilliant book about it called The Governor, which must be said in that voice, and it's really interesting. I mean, she clearly is a woman who was very, very successful in the prison system, so I'll put that point to her a little bit later on. In regard to the sorry, I'll actually just read this from Penny in Essex here. She says, good morning, Peter. Having worked in a prison for 18 years, I think if prison officers were given weapons, the prisoner would soon get hold of them and there would be mayhem. Prison officers hate being called prison warders. It's Dickensian, says Penny in Essex. I will try to remember to call them prison officers. Have I called them warders? I don't think I have, but I know some other people do, so thank you for that. I want to go back a little bit just to think about our story on the borders and immigration. John Healey is the Defence Secretary, and he's been speaking to Sky News this morning about this allegation that Labour has lost control of the borders. I wonder what you think about it, but the Defence Secretary, John Healey, this is what he said to Sky News on that topic.
Truth is, Britain's lost control of its borders over the last 5 years, and the last government last year left an asylum system in chaos and record levels of immigration. I think yesterday tells us a really big problem, which is you've got French police unable to intervene and intercept the boats when they're in shallow waters. We saw the smugglers launching elsewhere and coming round like a taxi to pick them up. Now, one of the steps, and this is a complex problem, but one of the steps we've now got is the cooperation, new cooperation with the French, and an agreement. They'll change the rules so the police can intervene in the water as well as on the shore.
Well, really interesting from the Defence Secretary there. They say, and he says, and Labour say, and the government say, they have a plan to deal with this. Do you think they have a plan? Do you think anything is really actually happening? 0344 499 1000. Front page of the Sunday Times today, British fighter jets to carry nuclear bombs. This is the government seeking airborne tactical weapons in the biggest defence expansion since the Cold War. Britain wants to buy combat aircraft capable of firing tactical nuclear weapons in a huge expansion of the nuclear deterrent to counter the growing threat from Russia. I think they would actually drop the bombs rather than fire them. But anyway, Sir Keir Starmer's government is in highly sensitive talks over the move, which would represent the biggest development in the UK's deterrence since the Cold War and a recognition that the world has entered a more dangerous nuclear era. Well, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, of course, he is in those talks. He has the strategic Defence Review, and he will be talking about that tomorrow. We've little bits of information about that, including this story today. Sky News asked him about that. This is what he said.
When are these factories going to be in production?
Well, the detail of where they are and when they come...
It's not detail.
We'll follow, but you...
Mr Putin's watching this. He wants to know... should he be frightened now? Should he be frightened in 2030? Should he be frightened in 2040? What are we talking about?
Yeah, look, the message to Putin is we take our defence seriously. We're stepping up our deterrence. We should expect to see new factories opening very soon. And we've already got strong munitions factories in every part of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And the investment we're making will boost the jobs in those areas as well.
Maxwell, should we be investing in jets that can drop nuclear bombs?
I don't think so. I mean, the question that should be posed is whose nuclear bombs are they going to be? Because we only have submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs. So we'd have to buy new nuclear weapons. And I don't think they... maybe the government know way more than I do. They probably do. But, you know, it just seems like just something that we shouldn't be doing. I mean, we actually have a recruitment crisis in the armed forces. All of our kit is ancient, and they want to, you know, get hike defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2034. So I suggest to you and your viewers to start learning Russian, because it's just not going to cover anything. So I think it's a total misuse of resources, to be honest. So I think we need to pay soldiers much more. We need to be investing more in the actual equipment, the firearms, the you know, tanks and the infantry fighting vehicles, and not buying who knows what bombs from elsewhere. I think it's a silly thing to do.
I have a really unpopular view with a lot of our viewers and listeners, and please give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Tell me why I'm wrong if you want to. I don't really understand where we're a nuclear power. I don't really understand the point of Trident. And this is a development of that. This isn't coming in line with other nuclear-armed nations. And Phil, I just wonder what your perspective on this is.
Well, I suppose that nuclear is because, in a geopolitical sense, we're keeping up with the Joneses. It's because other countries have nuclear that they could use against us, and if we don't have nuclear that we can retaliate with, then potentially they will just be seen as a soft target. Not that we're not already anyway. I would say that in terms...
my point.
So, but I'd say that in terms of the way that the shape of the military is looking at the moment, you know, whatever these announcements are is all well and good, but it's not really going to be much use if we don't have the personnel on the ground to actually deal with any potential threat that comes our way, which is why I personally believe that what we should be looking at as a country, and I actually think could solve a great number of our problems in this country, is bringing back the idea of national service. Now, national service does not necessarily mean that people are going to be sent to the front line to start fighting. In fact, quite the contrary. It would basically be a continuation of the education system where people of a certain age would be required
What age?
I would have thought 18 to 21 possibly, but actually required to, of a certain age, go through a series of actually serving the country in local, like sort of a local level. You don't necessarily have to go off and fight per se.
Do you know
but
what?
The way we would
Every single person I speak to in the military says there's no point having people in the military who don't want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Correct, but at the same time, national service could potentially invoke that thought into them and actually say, oh, OK, well, this is what military life is like. Maybe I am actually interested in potentially fighting for the country. It would ensue discipline into people. It would create a better society for people to live in, because let's be honest, most people in society now are revolting. They just don't know how to behave and don't know what to do. The fact that we've got sort of theft, shoplifting going through the roof, people don't know how to be nice to one another anymore. It's literally all of these simple things like basic manners. I wholeheartedly believe it could genuinely create a nicer society.
Maxwell?
I don't want the government in that way, you know, intervening in our lives. And I've spoken to senior people in the MOD about this, and I've said, well, what did you think about the suggestion from the last election that we have national service? They went, do you have any idea how much of a nightmare that's going to be, having to basically do what is an extensive kind of internship for half the country in the military? I mean, there are some areas where it could work, and they're looking at doing internships in the MOD. So logistics, for example, really important in the military and really useful in the private sector. But, you know, I was with the cadets at school, and half the people I was in there with didn't want to be there, really, and it was a right nightmare for most people. And, you know, I'm good friends with the people who suggested in the last election at Onward, the think tank Onward, that we do have national service, and they haven't resurfaced the idea, to be honest. I think it's a bit of a red herring, and I'm not a huge fan.
Let's go to Paul in Hartlepool. Paul has given us a ring on 0344 499 1000 with his thoughts on this prison story. This is Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, saying that he thinks that that prison officers should be armed. And I wonder what you think about this, Paul.
Well, I don't think they should be armed, but what I do think there should be a deterrent, where as we get a contract with another country, right, a bit like Guantanamo Bay that Trump's got, to ship these people out that are really causing problems in the jails. And also, while you're on, I think we should have a referendum to bring back the badge for anybody shoplifting and likes of skipping rail fares and all that. And basically, you'd empty the prisons by about 20% in about a year of petty fees, and that if they got brought back the badge.
I mean, that seems a bit extreme to me, Paul. I just wonder if that's the right idea. Surely we can be a better society and persuade people in different ways rather than corporal punishment.
Yeah, but the thing is, you need a carrot and a stick. If you're a good guy, you get let out a little bit earlier. If you're a bad guy, you get the stick. I know it sounds heavy to bring back the badge, but just the threat of it, and just the threat of getting kicked out of the country because you're a pain in the butt in the jail, and basically they'd have to say that if you have any problems in the jail while you're in, and tell your family that you'll be shipped out to another country.
Okay. Paul, thanks for your... Sorry, final point there, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, you need deterrence.
Okay. Paul, thanks very much for your thoughts. That's Paul in Hartlepool. Quick reaction, and then we'll go to a break from Maxwell and Phil to what Paul was saying there.
I mean, I don't think corporal punishment is the way forward. What I do think we need to be looking at, actually, is the fact that, the kind of adding more time onto sentences should be important. And I would agree, actually, with the Prison Officers Union, who have called for supermax prisons. And I think that is the answer to a lot of this violence.
Okay. Phil?
A simple summary. Crime was nowhere near as high in this country as when we had corporal punishment.
Okay. The perspectives of Phil, Dave and Maxwell Marlowe. We'll come back to them. We'll discuss this prison stuff properly because there's loads to get into. Actually, we'll do that in just a few minutes. And very soon we'll be speaking to a former prison governor. We're also speaking to Robert Jenrick very, very soon about his plan here. We'll speak to Sarah Pochin from the Reform UK, their most recent MP, to see what she thinks. Do you know what? It's her birthday too today. She just messaged me on WhatsApp. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company. Lots of people getting in touch, including Barney, who's a military veteran from Cornwall. He says national service will not work in this day and age. People are now too woke. Military veterans will not back Starmer either. The name Keir Starmer does not appear in my oath of allegiance or anyone else's for that matter. Ian in Lancashire says, if we can't stop a few rubber dinghies, the Russians and even the French are laughing at us. Hi Peter, Healy talking about defence of the UK. Laughable, seeing as his party can't defend our borders from unknown illegal migrants, says Leslie. I mean, he is the Defence Secretary. Chris in Belfast says, good morning Peter, the idea of having fighter jets carrying nuclear weapons is absurd. The range on them probably isn't suitable for that. If anything, the MOD need to invest in long-range bombers to do that job. They're the most suitable for carrying that weight over great distances, says Chris in Belfast. And Simon in Aberdeen says, the French police stopping the boats in the water. Sure thing, is this part of the smash the gangs strategy? What an absolute joke. And one more on prisons, which we're going to talk about in a second with Maxwell and Phil. Arming prison officers with weapons, a really bad idea, says Darryl. It would mean shipping all the Islamists and terrorists into one space. It would mean the redesign of prisons to add catwalks which prison officers could sit, stand and use the weapons safely without having them taken off them by the inmates. It sounds good on paper, but we don't have the money to do it. Well, we are talking to Vanessa Freck, who is a former prison governor, in a few minutes' time. But let's get the perspectives of Maxwell Marlowe and Phil Dave, who are with me on the debate desk. Phil, arming prison officers, we're talking about, or more accurately, Robert Jenrick, who'll join us in a minute or two. He is talking about the fact that he thinks that prison officers should be armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I'm a bit on the fence on this because my gut instinct tells me that for prison officers' safety, it makes perfect sense for them to be armed so that they feel safer in their job. But then we've got a much deeper problem here. Clearly, we have a situation where, and might I say as well, the other thing that worries me is that if indeed they do have weapons and then prisoners get their hands on it, that of course would worry me. However, but let's look actually sort of at the deep-rooted problem we've got here is that the prison system has been broken for so many decades now. This is successive governments have completely messed up on the prison front. I think that we need to graciously accept that rather than trying to fix what we've got, it's almost a case of starting from scratch, and that starting from scratch looks like almost plodding along like we're doing now, and then actually focusing on building new, more high security facilities that are relevant for prisoners who have actually convicted the most heinous of crimes. The problem we've got is that by and large, even if they are slightly segregated, more often than not you find that low-level thieves are actually in the same prisons as
they're run by
high-end criminals.
You're absolutely right. I was a special advisor at the Ministry of Justice only for 6 months, but I learned a heck of a lot about prisons in that time, I can tell you. And you're absolutely right. And what happens is you go into prison and essentially it's who runs the prison. And the answer is not the prison officers. The answer is the gangs. And you say, how are you going to be protected? Are you going to do what the gang says? Are you going to join a gang? Are you, in some cases, not all cases, but are you going to be under the control of an Islamist gang? Are they going to force you to convert to Islam, for example, as part of that? Also, there are a load of people who go into prison who aren't terrorists when they go in, but they're terrorists when they go out.
Absolutely.
Maxwell, what's your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big problems, and it unfortunately, as with, you know, we see this kind of all over the world when it comes to gangs in prisons. It seems to be everywhere. So I don't think we can solve that with simple policy changes, but we have to look at who is in the prisons, and the majority of the people in prison are there because of violent crime. And I think it may need you know, prison itself is a violent experience. You can read Foucault to find out why that is. But what I'm concerned about is prisoners getting their hands on stun grenades and on baton rounds. You mentioned earlier, you know, prisoners are making shivs out of, you know, trays and all sorts, and toothbrushes and all sorts. That's dangerous enough. And I do worry if they got their hands on more advanced weaponry. So I think we need to be having these supermax prisons, you know, purpose-built for violent prisoners, rather than what we have at the moment, which is just inherited prisons from the 20th century. So it needs a bit of a revolution, and I think we should start actually by deporting a lot of the foreign criminals. We've got about 10,000 foreign criminals in British prisons that British taxpayers are paying for. They need to be deported.
I mean, that's a lot easier said than done. I agree. I absolutely agree with you that basically I would do it on the moment of conviction. I would say, you're a foreign prisoner, you've been convicted, off you go, you're on a plane to wherever you came from, and hopefully they will lock you up. But the fact is, we don't know those countries are going to lock people up. We don't know they're going to stay there for the same sentence. They have different laws, they have different systems, and also the fact that there's just a lot of law at the moment that would need to be changed. We should do it. The government has awesome power. It is 411 MPs elected in June 2024. They can bring back Parliament on a Saturday to sort out the blast furnace in the north of England if they need to. But this is an issue which would need huge change. It's massive reform, isn't it,
But
Phil?
I'll be honest with you, I almost don't care what that country decides to do with them once they've been returned. As far as I'm concerned, go back from whence you came. And if
someone had murdered someone in your family, Phil, God forbid that should ever happen, and they were sent back to the country that they came from and they were free, that would not feel like justice.
No, of course it wouldn't feel like justice, but at the same time it doesn't feel like justice equally, the fact that the British taxpayer is paying for them. So, you know, I mean, you've got to think of the masses here. And as much as I completely and utterly understand, and heaven forbid a million times anyone finds themselves in that situation, and for the record, I do know people who have found themselves in sort of not far dissimilar situations. So I'm not being unsympathetic towards them, but you do have to think about the bigger picture. And one of the biggest problems that we have in today's day and age is we seem to pander to a minority rather than the majority. And the awful truth is the majority of people, thank God, can't relate to what it's like to having an individual in your family killed by another individual who is a foreign criminal. But what they can relate to is taxes going through the roof and knowing that some of their hard-earned money is paying for these reprobates to merely exist in our country, and that's not going to go down well.
Well, lots of taxes go to all sorts of things we don't want or need, but that's an argument, certainly. Nick is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Nick, what is your perspective on this?
Oh, hello, Peter. I was interested to hear your guest say the answer to the problem is build more jails. Now, that may be so, but it takes years upon years upon years to build a new prison from scratch. We need to help solve the problem now. The prison officer at Long Lartin had apparently boiling water thrown over them within the past 2-3 weeks.
That's right.
Suggesting the answers to build prisons, which takes years, doesn't help the officers now. I'd be interested in your guest's views on what they would do now.
Well, let's find out, Nick. And just to say, I mean, I'd mentioned as a special advisor, worked in politics for 3.5 years, as many people will know. I was at the Ministry of Justice, and look, the Conservatives over 14 years built 500 prison places. They probably needed to double the capacity of the prison. There wasn't a huge amount I could do about that in 6 months, it must be said, but nonetheless, Boris Johnson did announce 20,000 new prison places. They haven't happened just yet, although some prisons are being built. Right, let's answer that question from Nick, first with Maxwell and then with Phil. Maxwell, what would you do now?
Multifaceted strategy. So, I would do I would start on those new prisons. I'm going to keep to that line, but I would also just start doing, just isolating prisoners who are the most violent, the convicted terrorists, the serious paedophiles, the gang leaders.
But that happened in HMP Frankland. That's what happens there.
Okay, well, the policy needs changing. They need to be completely isolated. Don't let them out the cell. Give them some food, keep the toilet there, that's it, don't let them out.
Phil? To be perfect, I can't really disagree much with that, because that's exactly what I'd say as well. I think that sort of, Nick, that you misunderstand sort of my point when I say about building new prisons. You're absolutely right, we are in crisis now, and I think I actually did make a caveat of saying that I appreciate that it's not necessarily going to do much now, but the problem you've got is that we are muddling along indefinitely at the moment. At least if we muddle along for now, knowing that these new high security system and buildings are on the way, at least that is something. As things stand, we don't have anything that we're looking towards. But in terms of what I would do now is I'd make prison more like prison. Stop giving all of these blooming benefits to prisoners. It drives me insane.
Axel Radicubana with his Maltesers. I mean, the guy threw boiling water over a prison officer. First of all, he shouldn't have access to boiling water. If Axel Radicubana doesn't have another cup of tea in his life, I don't care. Nick, what do you think of what Maxwell and Phil have said?
Yeah, look, I was involved in the building of the best part of 2,000 new prison places in the UK. I know how the system works, and over that period, I got a towering admiration for the people on the prison floor. Yeah, the warders. The people who are prisoner facing, towering admiration. And there was a common complaint about that that they said to us was that their voices were never heard by the Ministry of Justice. If they were ignored.
Yeah.
And I suggest the starting point for any improvement has got to be listen to the people who've got first-hand experience of what it's actually like walking the floors, carrying keys. You know, you're at risk when you're a key carrier.
Of course.
Secure side.
And there are so many people, Nick, I don't know if you're familiar with Ian Atchison, who has actually been asked by Robert Jenrick to do a review of extremism in prison. He did one years ago. He's a former prison governor. We speak to him on this programme every now and again, and he says all of this. He says there are far too many people at senior levels, executive power within the prison system, within HMPPS, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, who have never walked a floor, who have never worn a uniform, who have never made a decision in a split second about what to do.
And that is the complaint that came over again and again and again.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I think
prison can never work perfectly.
Yeah.
No prison officer can ever behave perfectly over 24/7 working experience. But there needs to be some understanding of what it actually entails.
Well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something, Nick. I visited Belmarsh Prison, and I've been behind bars at a number of other prisons, actually. I'm going to talk to Vanessa Frake about that in a second, actually, and I learned far more from those visits, even an hour, even a couple of hours, than I did from any meeting at the Ministry of Justice. Although there were a number of civil servants who did know their stuff and were very, very good, and I will sometimes defend the civil service. It's not just full of woke tree huggers, although they are there as well. Speaking of woke tree huggers, thank you very much to Phil Dave and Maxwell Marlowe. Phil is a broadcaster and Maxwell is political commentator. Thank you both very, very much indeed for joining us on the debate desk. In a second, we're going to talk to Vanessa Frake. She is a former head of security at Wormwood Scrubs. She knows this stuff backwards. What does she think about Robert Jenrick's plan? We'll ask her, then we'll ask him. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think he was just not prepared to risk what might come on the budget day, hence why it happened the day before. It wasn't anything to do, he wasn't depressed. I mean, he did have struggles looking after my mum, and he was struggling with that, but he wasn't depressed. We lived next door to each other, and we spent hours together each day. It really was the financial side of things that just, I'm sure it was just a decision he took. He thought, I'm not worked all my life for the government to take it off me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sarah, who's an RAF veteran from West Sussex, who has texted me to say, Peter, I'm a veteran. I served during the Cold War. Jets carried weapons with nuclear warheads then. The range is such that it protects the crew. Julie says, let's get one thing clear. Only the UK government can stop the boats. No one else is interested, least of all France. All these European countries need to protect their own borders and keep pushing them back, says Julie. Jane says, somehow we need to stop people becoming criminals in the first place. Discipline and manners are lacking these days. Surely this starts at home. Couldn't agree more, Jane. Thank you to the person who says we all need the Second Amendment in the UK to protect ourselves if the state won't. That'll save some prison places. Morning, Peter, says Brian. Morning, Brian. The more tolerant our pathetic politicians become, the less civilised we become. Our tolerance is wearing thin. That's Brian in Worthing there. And thank you to Debbie, who says prisoners need to be treated like prisoners. Slop out, take away privileges. If they cause a mess, they live in it until they clean it up with cold water and a sponge, says Debbie. Well, someone who knows all about prisoners, prisons, prison discipline is Vanessa Freck. She is a former prison governor herself. She's a former head of security at Wormwood Scrubs, actually, and has written a book called The Governor, which must be said in that voice by law. There is a law about that, not really. And I want to ask Vanessa right now about this big idea from Robert Jenrick. Arm jail staff to stop Islamist attack. That is the front page of the Sunday Express today. Jenrick calling for action. He says prison officers must be armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to prevent their kidnap or murder by Islamist terrorists. Vanessa, is this a good idea?
Well, it's a great headline anyways. Look, no, it isn't. You know, I don't know whether Robert Jenrick has ever been in a prison, but a prison, as you know, is a confined spaces. The 3 staff that were who were assaulted at Franklin carried batons, they carried parva spray. They didn't have time to draw those before that attack happened. My worry is if we have staff now armed on landings, that they will be overpowered, those taken off them and used against them. I admire Robert Jenrick's sticking up for prison officers because certainly somebody needs to. It's a shame his government couldn't do it over the last 14 years and have left our prisons in the state that they currently are. But look, I think it's 40% of the time, tasers don't even work. You know, you have to be 15 feet away. There are prisoners, there are people who are resistant to it. Some pull the probes out. Prisoners on drugs, it can have no effect at all. You know, I mean, this is, to me, this is a headline-grabbing story.
And interestingly, Vanessa, I just wonder if there's any way prison officers can protect themselves more, because the system that is there is something that actually, in fairness to Robert Jenrick, and we'll ask him about this in a few minutes' time, but he has said this week, for example, that Axel Rudakabana shouldn't have had any access to boiling water. And in fact, he said he'll be very happy if Axel Rudakabana never has another hot drink in his life. So we're in a situation where the Sun was reporting yesterday that the Southport murderer had access to privileges, had access to being able to buy sweets like Maltesers and so on. Why on earth is that, Vanessa? A lot of people worry, how on earth can prisoners have these kinds of privileges? You have to incentivise them in some way to behave themselves, I suppose, or maybe you don't. I don't know. What's your perspective on this, Vanessa?
Well, look, this currently alleged assault by Rudakabana is under police investigation, and I hope dearly that he's charged with it. But look, canteen can be taken away. You're absolutely right. It's a privilege. But whilst there's a police investigation...
Is canteen, is that being able to buy these treats and things like that? Yeah, okay, right.
But again, that can be taken away after an adjudication. But the adjudication will be remanded until the police investigation has occurred. You can't run an adjudication and a police investigation for the same offence at the same time.
So you have, just to be clear, I think a lot of people just won't understand that, Vanessa, just to be absolutely clear, he has done this. I don't think I'm going to libel him. I don't think he's going to sue me for libel. He has done this as far as we're clear. He's thrown this, horrendously attacked this brave prison officer with hot water, with boiling water. But his privileges can't be taken away at the moment because there's a police investigation and the prison can only act on that when the police investigation is finished. Is that right?
Yeah, if there's no charges, yes. I mean, he'd go under an adjudication where he goes before a governor and he can be awarded loss of privileges, loss of TV, loss of canteen, solitary confinement, and various other things. But look, you know, I think the bigger picture here is the management of individuals, where, you know, I'm absolutely, in actual fact, I agree with Robert Jenrick. You know, I'm not bothered whether prisoners like him ever have a cup of hot water again. I've seen some horrendous injuries, both on staff and other prisoners, from boiling water and sugar. You know, it is kind of like life-changing for those individuals. The issue with kettles in cells, and they're like mini kettles that like you get in a hotel, they were introduced. What used to happen was two staff members used to go around cell to cell with big urns, giving prisoners hot water so they could make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, but it was always lukewarm. But of course, you know, we haven't got the staff to do that now. And I think, you know, with these high profile, highly dangerous individuals who are going to assault staff on a regular basis, the management of them is the key here. You know, yes, put them in supermax regimes, have them handcuffed when they come out of the cell for 1 hour's exercise a day. Escorted by 3 staff, escorted by an officer with a patrol dog. You know, these are strict management programs. Unfortunately, what has happened is, over the years, discipline has been eroded, and we've come to appease prisoners like this by letting, you know, somebody who murdered 20-odd people have access to a kitchen because he's serving 55 years, when there are Cat C prisoners who've never hurt anybody who would love to have cooked their own meals. And I think this is the issue, and this is what we need to be looking at.
What do you think would happen if prison officers were given tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds? What do you think would happen in prisons if that happened? God forbid, you know, with the baton rounds, they are very dangerous. You know, there's a lot of injuries and even death by those. And, you know, what happens if it doesn't go off? What happens if it hits the wrong person? What happens if it hits a member of staff? As I said, prisons are confined spaces. Landings are only 3 foot, 4 foot wide. You know, prison cells, the normal prison cell is 6 foot by 8 foot. You know, you haven't got the space, you haven't got the time to react. When assaults happen, and, you know, assaults aren't a new thing. Up to 2024, September 24, there were 10,500 assaults against staff. This isn't a new thing. What's happened is this has been highlighted because of notorious, and I use that word ungraciously, notorious individuals, and that's why it's suddenly been highlighted. But Robert Jenrick fully knows that over the years we have asked for stab vests. We were told it was too intimidating. I mean, that's ludicrous.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Vanessa, a weird question, but were you at Wormwood Scrubs as head of security when the BBC programme Question Time came behind the prison walls and did the show there? Were you head of security at that point?
I was. I organised that, actually, yes.
Do you,
2010 it was.
Do you remember a slightly annoying, slightly in-your-face young producer who was involved with that programme as well, by any chance? Because when I was reading and thinking about you this morning, it all fell into place that we have actually met and worked on that literally, 15 years ago? Yes,
yeah, I remember it well. Unfortunately, Peter, although I've got to know you over the last few years, I cannot say hand on heart.
I'm very forgettable. Vanessa, I remember you because you're quite a memorable character, and you were very, very good. And you were very, very helpful. So thank you for that. It just all came into my mind today. So thank you for that. That is Vanessa Frake there, who is a former prison governor and author of a book called The Governor. Stab vest now, please, says this person. Rodney has been in touch as well and says, where control has been lost in prison and sectarian or gangs have created no-go areas. The army should be brought in to bring back control. Once reorganised, control can be handed back to the governor. Joanna in Salisbury says low-level foreign prisoners deported, murderers or very violent prisoners kept in high-security prisons, new supermax prisons to be built using low-level prisoners, cheap labour, learning a trade, arming prison warders unless they increase numbers of guards with new regimes with training is dangerous. JB says, why not rehabilitate non-violent crime in the community and save prison for the very worst violent crimes? And one more from Dorothy in East Kilbride says, good morning, Peter. Love Phil Dave. I agree with everything he has said from immigration to prisoners. I love his common sense view, says Dorothy. Thank you. I want to say a big thank you to every person. There have been quite a few of them who wished me a happy birthday. I wasn't planning on advertising that it's my birthday today, but it is. And do you know who else's birthday it is? Sarah Pochin. Yes, really. Massive coincidence. We booked her a while ago. I didn't know that. She is Reform UK's newest MP. We're going to talk to her in a second. We're going to get her views on all of this. And then we'll speak to Robert Jenrick about his plan to arm prison officers. What do you think? 0344 499 1000.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I'll shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Wherever.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Our top story and indeed our question to you this morning is how do we fix the prison system? Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, he says that prison officers should be given tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to prevent their kidnap or murder by Islamist terrorists. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. We're talking about defence as well. Big strategic defence review coming tomorrow. The MPs are going to have to debate that and decide whether it should go ahead. Sarah Pochin is one of them. She is Reform UK's newly elected MP. We'll talk to her in just a second. But we want your views too. We'll hear from Sarah. We're going to hear from Robert Jenrick himself. But what do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell or you can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on that main number, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Sarah Puchin is with us now. She is Reform UK's newly elected MP for Helsby and Runcorn. Sarah, lots to discuss, but very briefly, I just want to say a very happy birthday to you.
And a happy birthday to you, Peter.
Well,
Can you believe that?
We're both. It's a remarkable coincidence, and we're both turning 25 today, or so
Absolutely.
we would have everyone believe. Right, on the serious story on the front of the Sunday Express: armed jail staff to stop Islamist attacks. That is what Robert Jenrick is saying. He wants tasers, stun grenades, and baton rounds to be in prison to prevent prison officers kidnap or even murder by Islamist terrorists and many other people, very undesirable. Evil people in prisons. We've had so many attacks over the last few weeks. It's a real problem. Do you think he's right, Sarah?
I actually think Robert Jenrick he's such a cheek. They've been in power for 14 years. They could have sorted this out, and they've put our brave prison officers, our men and women, at risk, increasingly so, from these dangers now. This isn't a new thing. This is being reported now because we've got some, fairly notorious prisoners that are causing these problems. But yet again, yesterday, another prison officer, I think, had a knife attack. This isn't new. The Tories did nothing about it, and how Robert Jenrick can now come out with this stuff. And actually, I don't think it shows much of an understanding of what it's like in prisons. As you know, I was a magistrate for 20 years. The space is so confined. To put sort of these type of weapons in is a potential for even more violence. What these prison officers need is the prisons emptying out of the 10,000 foreign national offenders we've got in there. The prison officers need proper training, not put on the wings too early, and they need the basics of stab vests, for goodness sake, that they were told were too intimidating for these prisoners. What on earth is going on? And why have these prisoners got kettles in their room? If you're convicted of something, never mind not having a cup of tea, for goodness sake, you just don't get those privileges. It beggars belief that we are being so soft.
Sarah, what is fascinating to me, we just spoke to a former prison governor a minute ago, and she said an almost unbelievable system. So Axel Rudakubana, who is the Southport killer, what he has done, big story in front of the Sun yesterday, I'm sure you saw it, in regard to the privileges that he still has. He can buy Maltesers and various things. So the reason that happens is the way it works in prisons is there can't be an adjudication. There can't be a governor who says to him, has a process, looks at the evidence and says, right, your privileges are being taken away, until the end of a police investigation. So for the moment he has all that. It's astonishing.
Astonishing. If I was the prisons minister, that would be changed immediately with the stroke of a pen. I've never heard such woke, soft nonsense. And the other thing that we need to be worried about in these prisons is the rise of the Islamist influence in these prisons. Who is running these prisons? Because they're dangerous places now. Are the prison guards running them, or are the inmates running them?
Sarah, I just want to put the thoughts of Kemi Badenoch to you. She spoke to Times Radio yesterday, and she said something which I found pretty curious. And what about you think? Let's just play the clip from Kemi Badenoch.
There's only one policy, really, that Reform has that could be talked about as right-wing, and that is on immigration, which we talk about every single week. We have policies on immigration, they don't. I think the last thing they said they were going to announce on immigration was a minister for deportations. We already have two ministers for deportations, the immigration minister and the home secretary. It's just not serious. This isn't centre-right politics. It's Corbynism with a Union Jack.
We have policies on immigration, they don't. So, Sarah, apparently you don't have a policy on immigration, and also you're a Corbynista. What's your reaction to that? Have you been knitting any yoghurt recently? Have you been any pro-Palestinian marches?
It's quite incredible what both Labour and the Tories are coming out with. Of course, we have a policy on immigration, and the main thing that we will do is, of course, leave the European Convention of Human Rights, which is what the Tories have refused to do, and it's what Labour will refuse to do. And it wasn't in Keir Starmer's reset with the EU at all. In fact, he was bringing us closer to the European Court of Justice. But on the subject of immigration, it's totally out of control. I don't think that the British people will put up with 1,200 people coming over a day. 18 boats yesterday came in. And by the way, people that needed rescuing in that sea on kayaks and things had to be rescued by local fishing boats because the lifeboats were rescuing the illegal immigrants. How long do you think people in this country are going to put up with this?
Well, you have diagnosed a lot of problems there. And this week we heard from Nigel Farage. We're going to hear more from him tomorrow. There's a by-election in Scotland, and Reform are polling well there, although the SNP are the favourites to take it. We'll see what happens. You've diagnosed a lot of problems. Nigel Farage has talked about some solutions. I can honestly say in 4.5 years of presenting programmes on this station, I've never seen so much anti-Nigel Farage sentiment on any policy on his than on his views on lifting the two-child benefit cap. What would you say to our viewers and listeners who think that's a bad idea?
Well, first of all, we were talking about immigration. Can I just finish that one?
Sure.
We are the only party with policies on immigration. Every single person that illegally comes to this country gets deported, first of all, to a holding centre offshore, and then deported home. And we know that they chuck their papers away, so it's hard to find out where they've come from. But we will, and we will deport them home. So just to finish that, we do have very clear policies on immigration. Now, moving on, you asked me about the two-child benefit cap.
Yeah.
What Reform are really keen to do is support hard-working families. We know the birth rate is low in this country. We know we need to and one of our main policies is about supporting families. We know that hard-working families where two people are out to work they're really up against it. And if we can do anything to help and ease that situation for those sort of couples that are out at work, setting their alarms, paying their taxes and wanting to bring up a family, then we will do it.
Won't it benefit people who aren't, Sarah? Won't it benefit a lot of people who are on benefits who aren't working? Some of them will be working, but a lot of them won't be.
There's always abuse of the system. And as I said,
it's not abuse of the system to not have a job and to get extra benefits for having children.
Believe me, 20 years as a magistrate, Peter, I have seen, and I've worked in the family courts too, I have seen people that do abuse the system and have children to get more child benefits.
I'm sure that exists, but
to get bigger houses, all the rest of it.
Sarah, I am absolutely sure that you've seen that. I'm not casting any doubt on that whatsoever. What I'm saying is that within the system that you at Reform UK espouse, you could perfectly legally simply not have a job or have lost your job, decide to have another child, decide to have a third, fourth, fifth or whatever child and receive child benefit because of that within universal credit. Like that is something that you're espousing. And a lot of our viewers and listeners are saying that is maybe not incentivising to have people to have children, but it's not actively encouraging them back into work, and it's not fair for people who do work.
I think if people have lost, if people are working, say, and they've got 3 children, and currently they're clearly for the third child, they don't currently have benefits, and then they lose their job, that's a terrible situation to be in. And this policy would obviously clearly help with that. And by removing this 2-cap system, I think 500,000 children, up to 500,000 children would be pulled out of poverty. So there's 2 sides to this, isn't there? But you are going to get the abuse. You're also going to get the people that genuinely need support. And the fact is we have low birth rates. We do need to encourage family values, and we do need to encourage people to have children.
OK, Britain wants to buy combat aircraft capable of firing tactical nuclear weapons. This is a huge expansion of the nuclear deterrent. Do you support that?
I have read this. I clearly support the fact that our defence spending needs to be much higher than it is. The 14 years of the Tories and now 10 months of Labour, what's happening to our defence spending? I mean, Labour could fix this with a stroke of a pen if they cancel the Chagos deal. I mean, all the billions paid over there to Chagos, let's put it into our defence budget. But, you know, no. Again, that's another Lord Hermer supporting policy there. Let's not get me started on him. But, yeah, of course we need to increase our defence budget. It's way too low. And particularly in the current global situation, there's threats everywhere. We need to be able to defend ourselves. It's one of the first duties of government. And it's a duty that the Tories did nothing to uphold. They should be ashamed of themselves that we're in this situation. When it comes to nuclear on these planes, that makes me very uncomfortable. Surely nuclear should be the ultimate deterrent.
Sarah, thanks for your thoughts there. And Lord Hermer, who you mentioned there, I mean, he is big into defence, mainly of Gerry Adams. A very happy birthday to you, Sarah. I hope you have a lovely day, and thank you for joining me here on Talk. Lots to discuss in regard to what Sarah has said. We're going to talk to Robert Jenrick in a second. He is the Shadow Justice Secretary. He's come out with this big idea today. Sarah's against it. We've got a prison governor who's against it. What does he say? Why does he think it's a good idea? This is Robert Jenrick's idea that prison officers should be armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to prevent their kidnap or murder. How do we fix the prison system is the wider question, but on both those questions, whether these prison officers should have grenades, tasers and baton rounds, and the wider question of how we fix the prison system, let me know what you think, and let me know what you think of what Sarah said there. Sarah Pochin there, who is Reform UK's latest elected MP. She won that stunning by-election victory in Helsby and Runcorn, overturning a 14,000 Labour majority. People talk about, oh, they only won it by 6 votes. She's got the smallest majority, the 6 votes in it, a lot more than 6 votes in it. She overturned 14,000 majority. Labour are worried, let me tell you. Lots to discuss here on Talk. Robert Jenrick's next. Stay with us.
Dogs are racist, according to the Welsh Labour Party. Deary me. Sorry. I can't help it. Apparently, that's breaking news. The economy has grown by 0.1%. I'm sorry, between July and September, according to the Office for National Statistics.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Simon, who says, I think it's about time we started treating prisoners like prisoners and make them earn the things they get rather than taking things off them when they don't do what they should do. I also think we should stop giving them handouts such as personal independence payments and other government-funded handouts, says Simon. Thank you for that. And Paul says, I understand the need for perks and good behaviour, but it can also be used against them. Attack a guard, you'll lose all your perks for a year. That includes family calls, visits, TV, Xbox and tea making equipment in your cell. Remind them why they are there. Well, one person who wants to remind prisoners why they're there is Robert Jenrick. He is the Shadow Justice Secretary and he joins me now. Good morning, Robert.
Hi, Peter. Good to see you.
RoboCop, they're calling you this week after that video. You've had quite a reaction to it.
Yeah, look, I was fed up seeing people going through barriers when I'm down in London, and it's a national problem as well. I think people felt like mugs. That they're law-abiding, they're paying their fares when they're going to work, going to school, going out shopping, and yet you've got this minority of people who are flagrantly breaching the rules, and nothing seems to be done about it. And it's a bigger problem than this, isn't it? You see graffiti on public transport, you've got people playing obnoxious music. Well, instead of having headphones, you've got mobile phones being nicked.
Do you agree with the Liberal Democrats?
You've got tradesmen having their vans broken into.
Do you agree with the Liberal Democrats that people should be fined up to £1,000 for playing music on public transport?
Yeah, frankly, they should do. I mean, I don't usually agree with the Lib Dems, but they can't be wrong all the time.
Even a stop clock tells the right time twice a day, Robert.
Penalties.
Sorry,
the problem here is there's no enforcement.
Yeah.
There's no enforcement, Peter. You're seeing enforcement officers doing absolutely nothing. When I was at Stratford Station, there were 8 officers there who were stood around. There was one bloke with his feet up, scrolling on his mobile phone. The gate was open. People weren't tapping in and out. Under Sadiq Khan, prosecutions for fare dodging have actually fallen. In fact, they've halved since COVID. Where's Sadiq Khan on this? I want to see him out on your programme, Peter, explaining what he's doing. 15 million people have watched my video. They deserve to hear from the mayor of this city as to what he's going to do to fix this problem.
Sadiq Khan is very welcome to come on this programme any time. Sir Sadiq Khan, Knight of the Realm, of course. Robert, you've got another idea. This is that prison officers must be armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to stop their kidnap or murder by Islamist terrorists. Why do you think this is a good idea?
Look, we're seeing a deteriorating situation in our prisons, and I'm warning today that unless the government takes action, it's only a matter of time before a prison officer gets killed or is held hostage or there is a terrorist attack plotted from within one of our prisons. So what I'm saying is, let's give those brave men and women who are in our jails the tools they need to do their job and feel safe. Let's give them baton rounds, tasers, high-neck stab-proof vests, which, I mean, it's amazing they don't have those already. And in our maximum security jails where they deal with these extreme high-risk people like Axel Rudakabana or Hashim Mabedi, let's ensure that there is a secure armoury where specialist officers can go and get access to lethal weapons. So if these situations, God forbid, arise, they can regain control of the prison quickly, not have to call for people to come in an hour's time. That is unacceptable.
Robert, I spoke to a prison governor about 20 minutes ago. Her name is Vanessa Frake. She has written a book about her time as the head of security at Wormwood Scrubs. She knows of what she speaks, and she thinks this is a bad idea. This is what she said to me.
With the baton rounds, they are very dangerous. You know, there's a lot of injuries and even death by those. What happens if it hits the wrong person? What happens if it hits a member of staff? As I said, prisons are confined spaces. Prison cells, the normal prison cell is 6 foot by 8 foot. You know, you haven't got the space, you haven't got the time to react. When assaults happen, and, you know, assaults aren't a new thing. Up to 2024, September 24, there were 10,500 assaults against staff. This isn't a new thing. What's happened is this has been highlighted because of notorious individuals, and that's why it's suddenly been highlighted. But Robert Jenrick fully knows that over the years, we have asked for stab vests. We were told it was too intimidating.
That's someone, Robert, who was the head of security at a Category B prison. She was dealing with murderers and rapists. She says you're wrong.
Well, look, I've commissioned Ian Aitchison, one of the country's most respected former prison governors and experts in this field, to put together these proposals. So I back Ian, and we want to ensure that we tackle this issue. I thought that sounded very complacent. If you talk to prison officers, they are worried. Some of them are scared, frankly, right now. And we've got to get them the equipment that they need. And with respect to lethal weapons, these are used or could be used in prisons today. If, God forbid, there was a terrorist incident in a prison today, then armed officers would come to the prison. But it might take them an hour to get to one of these maximum security jails. Some of them are in very rural locations. Look at Long Larton in Worcestershire. No, I want to ensure there is a secure armoury on site, specialist officers ready to go, so we back those officers and get out of these situations. Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, has said that he could see a drone bringing in a weapon, explosives, into prisons. And so the prisoner, potentially an Islamist extremist who can't be negotiated with, would have a pistol themselves. It was absurd that there wouldn't be anybody within the prison who has access to something so they can fight back, regain control of the jail. That's what we're talking about. And yet it is wrong that prison officers don't have stab-proof vests today. The government is procrastinating. Let's get them now.
OK, you know and I know that there could very sadly be a situation where if you bring a baton round, a stun gun, a taser, a gun, a rifle, or whatever, into a prison, what happens if a prisoner gets hold of that? That's not outside the realms of possibility.
No, what we're saying here is the prisoner themselves may already have a gun. Charlie Taylor has said a drone could be used to bring in a gun or an explosives into a prison. What are the officers going to do then? Oh, say, excuse me, please give it to us. No. I want them to be able to have lethal weapons and to be specially trained so they can respond immediately. And this isn't hypothetical. Just this week we saw that a drone was used to bring in a knife and then allegedly a prisoner used that to stab an officer. We saw Axel Rudakabana, the Southport killer, allegedly attack an officer the other day. We saw Hashim Abedi, the Islamist terrorist who helped to plot the Manchester Arena bombings just the other day, attack allegedly a prison officer. This situation is grave and it's deteriorating. The government have got to step up and act, or I'm afraid these situations are going to happen. And I don't want to see that. So I've given the government recommendations by one, perhaps the most respected individual in this field, Ian Aitchison. They must act on them now. Stop procrastinating.
And Ian Aitchison, who you mentioned there, Robert, is a frequent guest on my programmes. I agree with you. He speaks a lot of sense. He has very good ideas, especially in regard to terrorists in prison. Let me ask you about something else related to this. And that is the clear fact that, and I had a very small role in this as a special advisor in the Ministry of Justice for 6 months, but the Conservatives just did not build enough prison places. They built 500 places in 14 years. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, that's going to be thrown at you by your political opponents and the public too, and prison officers, by saying you had the chance to stick up for them for over a decade and you didn't. So why should people believe what you say now?
Look, we should have built more prison places. I've been very clear about that. The last Conservative government built 13,000 prison places, actually. What the mistake that it made was decommissioning the old Victorian jails too quickly.
You added 500 places. You added 500 places.
Yeah, net 500, but it built 13,000. But look, I've been honest about that. I am the first person to say that the last Conservative government made mistakes. I resigned from the cabinet under the last Conservative government because I didn't feel it was going far enough on illegal and legal migration. I'm now the Shadow Justice Secretary. My job is to hold this government to account and to look to the future and say, how can we make this country a better place? And for justice, that means ensuring that our prison officers get what they need and that we don't make mistakes. And I see the Labour government making serious errors. They're making this problem worse. They're saying that they're going to scrap prison sentences of less than 12 months, so burglars and thieves and thugs who assault people won't go to jail. They're saying that people who commit serious crimes like arson will have their sentences cut to as little as a third, and killers and rapists will only serve half their sentence. You've got the MI5, the National Crime Agency, the Commissioner of the Met Police, warning that this is going to spark a crime wave. They need to change course. This is not the right approach.
Although a lot of those recommendations, of course, by David Gauke, a former Conservative Justice Secretary. I want to play you one more brief clip, Robert. This is of your party leader speaking to Times Radio yesterday.
There's only one policy, really, that Reform has that could be talked about as right-wing, and that is on immigration, which we talk about every single week. We have policies on immigration, they don't. I think the last thing they said they were going to announce on immigration was a minister for deportations. We already have two ministers for deportations, the immigration minister and the Home Secretary. It's just not serious. This isn't centre-right politics. It's Corbynism with a Union Jack.
Reform UK or Corbynism with a Union Jack? Robert Jenrick.
Well, look, I understand why some people vote Reform, but look at what happened in the last week. Nigel Farage has got into bed with Keir Starmer and agreed that we should be spending even more on welfare. He wants to hike the welfare bill by £3.5 billion, give thousands of pounds of savers' money in this country to people for their third, fourth or fifth child. Look, I know Nigel likes to have a pint or two, but it feels like he's had one too many when he came up with this policy. This is not what the public want. They certainly don't want this from an organisation like Reform. And then you've got Zia Youssef, the so-called chairman of Reform, in Las Vegas, coming up with wacky policies on cryptocurrency. I'm all for innovation, Peter, but this is not a priority of the British public.
Would you repeat the words
of myself?
Would you
listen to the public and come up with serious policies to tackle the things that working people in this country are actually focused on?
Would you repeat the words of your party leader that Reform UK is Corbynism with a Union Jack? Would you be happy to say that?
Look, Nigel Farage is getting into bed with Keir Starmer.
So you're not happy to say it?
Saying that he wants to hike the welfare bills. That is madness. What planet is this bloke on?
Is Kemi Badenoch the best person to be leader of the Conservative Party?
Yes, she is the leader of the Conservative Party. The members voted for her. She's making progress. She's just been holding the government to account. Look what she's done in the last couple of weeks. She has forced Labour into a massive U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Labour were taking it away from some of the poorest pensioners in our country, people earning as little as £13,000 a year, and now it looks like Labour are going to change course. Together, Kemi and I have forced Labour to change course on two-tier sentencing guidelines that would have meant there was a more lenient route through our criminal justice system, depending on the colour of your skin or the faith that you abide by. This is the work that we're doing, holding Labour to account.
Tell us your thoughts just before you go, Robert, in regard to the Strategic Defence Review. Britain wants to buy combat aircraft capable of firing tactical nuclear weapons. Is that the right policy? Will you be backing it?
Yeah, look, we live in a dangerous world. It's right that we spend more money on our armed forces. We're pleased that Labour are committing to 2.5%. We actually want to get to 3% by the end of this Parliament. Do that by cutting welfare, not increasing it like Keir Starmer is now proposing. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is a good man trying to do the best. I think everyone is right to be sceptical about Rachel Reeves and her commitment, because time and again she has broken her promises on winter fuel, on not hiking taxes for working people. If she's broken promises in 9 months, why would we believe that in 9 years' time they would get to 3% of GDP on defence?
Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, thanks for joining us here on Talk. What do you think of what Robert said there? What do you think about his views on defence, his views on prisons, and his views on Kemi Badenoch? He didn't repeat the words that she said there. I gave him 2 opportunities to do so when she called Reform UK Corbynism with a Union Jack. That was the controversy yesterday. Very happy to talk about it today if you want to. 0344 499 1000. Just a couple of messages before the break. Carol in Nottingham. Hi Peter, I absolutely do not think prison officers should be armed more than they are, as this would just put weapons in the hands of prisoners if they are overpowered. Exactly the point I made to Robert Jenrick. Another thing is people like him who carried out the Southport attacks, she's referring there to Axel Rudakabana there, should never be named. She doesn't want to, but I need to tell you who she's talking about, as that just gives them more notoriety than their victims, who should be the ones who are remembered, says Carol in Nottingham. Well, look, factually, he did it. That, you know, his name is in the public domain, Carol, and I don't know what I think about that. It's a weird one. Actually, tell me what you think, because I don't really know. In terms of naming these people, and people say, and I know there are other presenters in this station who say, you know, I'm not going to name the person who has committed this heinous crime. I don't know what I think about that. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Morning, Peter, says Kelvin. Why can't we just deport these migrants? France is having no problem deporting them. Are they in France deporting them all here to our country? We're the Rwanda plan, 0.1. Starmer needs to do the same, deport them back. We paid the French to stop them coming here, not send them here. They don't pay us, says Kelvin in Macclesfield. Colleen says, I fear arming prison guards with tasers and batons and sticks will only put them more at risk, put terrorist prisoners in solitary confinement. And one more on national service, I think, from Ian, who says there are many countries that have national service. We don't. If we want a proper answer, we should be asking them these questions, not ourselves. Of course, the regular service guys don't want to solve Tony Blair's legacy. Ian's written Tiny Blair. I wonder if that's a typo or whether he is meant to call him Tiny Blair. The trouble is that everyone with a plastic degree will want to be an officer, and the rest don't want to fight for something they don't appreciate, says Ian. Some breaking news now on Talk. 1,000 1,194 migrants were detected crossing the Channel yesterday. So let me just double check when the 1,000 crossed. That must have been Friday. 1,000 people crossed the Channel on Friday. 100 plus arrivals yesterday. Yes, that was Saturday. Of course, that's the Sunday Telegraph reporting that. But today, we're told 1,194 is the total. 1,194 migrants detected crossing the Channel yesterday. This is not being solved. This is not being stopped. This is not, there's nothing happening. There's just nothing happening. Border Force are a farce. When you have over 1,000 people illegally coming into this country, you know and I know the likelihood of those people being sent back to their home countries or indeed to France is probably close to zero. The government needs to get a grip. They need to get a grip of a lot of things. Who is best to get a grip? Is it Labour? Is it Reform UK? Maybe you think Robert Jenrick in the Conservative Party. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Paddy's given me a ring from Hampshire. You're very welcome to the programme, Paddy. What did you make of what Robert Jenrick said there?
Good afternoon, Peter. Well, I was a little bit dumbfounded because he said that Kenny Badenoch has forced Keir Starmer into a couple of U-turns. I'd rather think that had more to do with May the 1st.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, you know, the Tories lost all 16 of the county councils they controlled. Mm-hmm. Labour took a good kicking. And the very idea that Reform don't have immigration policies made me laugh. And then she said, I think it was that they already have two people, a minister and the Home Secretary. Mm. Well, it seems to me that in 14 years the Tories didn't manage to do anything. Now they suddenly think with the party that they've become, they're going to do it. Yeah. And we know that Labour, with an overwhelming majority, albeit by a landslip and not a landslide, the fact is that, you know, they haven't done anything and they have the power to do anything they want.
Let me tell you something, Paddy. I'll tell you something that happened behind the scenes this week. So what was very public, of course, was Nigel Farage on Tuesday talking about what Reform would do, what their policies are. He did that in London. He talked to, and he made very, very clear what their views are on things like not just immigration, but lots of other policies as well. Two-child benefit cap, controversially, the economy, net zero, loads of things that Reform would do in government, okay? On Thursday, Keir Starmer was meant to be away somewhere in Europe. We don't know exactly where, but it was meant to be away at an awards event. He cancelled that and deliberately went to St Helens, near Liverpool, went to St Helens and gave that press conference where he rubbished Farage, talked about Farage, said it was Liz Truss 2.0, all the rest of it. Now, my question is, Paddy, do you do that? Do you cancel your plans as Prime Minister for a foreign trip? Do you go to a place that you have to win in St Helens, that you have to win, that's under threat from Reform UK, if you're in a confident position?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's clearly rattled. I mean, I know it's a complicated process for Starmer to be removed as leader, etc., and I know that the far left are probably more keen to do it than, you know, most people would suggest.
Yeah, John McDonnell, who's Jeremy Corbyn's BFF, he has said, well, he's actually suspended from the Labour Party, but he you know, long-serving Labour MP, has said that Keir Starmer needs to be removed. Can you think of a better leader of the Labour Party, or is it bigger than one man?
No, and there's the rub, because frankly, you know, looking at their front bench, no. They've got some good new backbenchers, and I'm no fan of Labour. May I just bring up one other point?
Go ahead, go ahead, Paddy.
Jenrick was talking about, which was in Las Vegas. He talked about the chairman of Reforms here, Youssef, doing whatever.
Yep.
And there were many complaints in the week, not least on Question Time, that Nigel Farage spent his time in Las Vegas talking about crypto and not UK policies. I don't know if they were aware, but it was a crypto conference.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm not sure the average American wants to know the ins and outs of local services in the UK. Frankly, I don't think they would care.
But shouldn't Nigel Farage be in Clacton? Shouldn't he be serving his constituents?
There's a strong argument, but I think there's a bigger argument at the moment of the crypto versus CBDCs.
Yeah, we've had that debate on this programme, Paddy. Absolutely. But I would suggest something to you, Paddy, and this is my evaluation of what Nigel Farage did this week. I think Nigel Farage had more impact in Las Vegas than Kemi Badenoch had in London.
Oh, totally. I couldn't agree more. And of course, he does like fostering friendship in the US, which in the long term probably wouldn't do us any harm.
Well, you're absolutely right. His relationship with Trump, not a bad thing at all. Paddy, great to talk to you. Enjoyed the Shakespeare reference as well. Claire is in the Wirral and wants to have a chat about prisons. Claire, what would you like to say? Hello, Claire, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, we've got you. What would you like to say about prisons, Claire?
I'd like to say a happy birthday.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Claire.
Okay. Really, the thing that, came to me about prisons, there is a problem with prisoner guards being armed. And I can see... Can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah. No, you're making perfect sense. You're coming through loudly and clearly. Keep talking.
I was getting feedback on my phone. My phone's gone a bit dodgy.
Well, the feedback from me, Claire, is that you're talking a lot of sense, so keep going.
Okay. It's just about prison officers. If they are armed, we've already had problems with the police, special forces in the police discharging their arms. They end up going to court, because they've shot at somebody. They're armed police, and they've shot somebody and killed somebody and had to go up in front of the old beak.
Claire, this is exactly the point. Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, but this is exactly the point. I spoke to someone, a senior policing figure, former police officer, senior person. I spoke to him earlier. Well, I was WhatsApping him earlier this morning about this exact story, and that person said to me that the problem when this happens in prisons, you're going to have Chris Cabba all over again. Do you remember that? Do you remember that case where this was a drug dealer? He was shot and killed by the police officer. Police officer was cleared, and then, of course, facing professional misconduct charges for exactly, as far as I can see, and what the court said, following the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, and following his training. And I just think that would happen again in the prison system.
Yeah, I was actually alluding to Chris Cabba about what had happened. And I think this is going to happen. Unfortunately, it's our crazy human rights. I do agree with Jenrick, and I do feel that police officers need to be armed. I feel that prisons are a microcosm of Great Britain now. We have a terror threat. We have terrorists. And really, we do have to have armed police officers. But there is just this problem with our human rights. We're going to have to clamp down on that. and then we can actually have our police officers armed. And of course they need stab vests. It's pathetic. You know, you can have police officers turning up for hurty words wearing stab vests, for God's sake.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's part of their uniform, Claire. Yeah, part of their uniform. Thanks for your thoughts there, Claire. I really appreciate that. I want to go to Robert in Hertfordshire before the break. Robert, tell us your thoughts on this.
Hi, yeah. Listen, there's one guy you need to get on your show. You probably know him. His name's Duncan Campbell, and his wife is Julie Christie, the famous actress.
Oh, right. I think I might have interviewed him before, but I know I certainly, you're not the first person who's recommended him to me. What does he say, and why do you think he's good?
We have a mutual friend. Well, it's not that he visits a lot of ex-prisoners in prison.
Sure.
And I move in those circles. I mean, I've got a lot of heavy friends. You know, one of them was a part of John McVicker's gang. They're old men now, but they've done 20, 30 years in prison.
Right.
Now, they've told me straight away that the prisons now are Islamised.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is, with cases like Levi Belfield, to get protection, they turn over to Islam.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know.
It's not just, I got to say, Robert, factually, you're right, but also it's not just Islam. There are loads of different gangs in prisons, but they're definitely Islamist gangs, absolutely no doubt about that. And often, in terms of terror, there are a lot of people who go into prison on their ODCs, ordinary decent criminals, as they used to be called. Maybe some people like your mates you were alluding to there, but also people who are not radicalised, and they become radicalised in prison because of the structures in prison.
There's currently 10,000 foreign prisoners in. I've Googled it before I came online. 10,000, 12.5% that represents of the prison.
Yep. Sounds about right to me.
Just deport them. There you go. There's 10,000. There's 10,000 places straight away.
Let me counter that briefly, Robert. Sorry to keep interrupting you. I just want to counter that briefly because, look, I would love every single foreign criminal in our system to be deported. I wouldn't even put them in prison. I would make sure that as soon as they're convicted, they're on a plane home. But the problem is that you can't guarantee that they'll serve even a day in prison because you need to have an agreement with every single country there. And what they could do, in theory, is commit a murder here, be sentenced to 25 years, you deport them, they serve no time or a much shorter sentence, and then they come back.
Well, look, I love your programme, I love your station, and I especially love your programme. But you know what? You don't do us any good, because all you do is just wind us all up, because all you do is highlight, and not just you, but all the presenters on Talk, you wind us up to see what's wrong with it, and then tell us what we can't do. You know,
it's not me telling you can't do it, Robert.
We're in trouble. We need to do something now. Not for you. Not wait for another general election. We are in trouble, mate. And
You're right.
Need to do something.
You're right. You're right. And Robert, I agree with the vast majority of what you're saying, but it's my job to challenge it. It's my job to say, hold on a second here, mate. So it's not that I disagree with you necessarily. It's that my job sometimes to play devil's advocate and say, hold on a second, how would that work? But Robert, I mean, you have a really good perspective in all of this, clearly. And I just wonder what you think of Robert Jenrick or Nigel Farage or the current Justice Secretary, Shabnam Mahmood. Do you think there's anybody who can sort out the problems in our prisons?
Well, no, I mean, it's time. You know, we've got to wait 4 years. It's very interesting. I'm a member of Reform, and I only joined Reform after the general election to cheer myself up. But I don't trust Nigel Farage. He's a snake oil salesman. It's like they're him and Starmer. It's like they're changing places in the last week.
You think Nigel Farage is a snake oil salesman? Why do you think that, Robert?
I think he walks the walk, talks the talk, but he don't walk the walk. And I think, I'll tell you what annoyed me, and when I started getting a bit suspicious, he said that he wouldn't rule out bringing Shamina Begum back to this country if he was in power. Well, that's a big... That is my vote gone.
Okay. Even though you're a member of the party, you may not even vote for Reform UK.
No, I'll definitely... Well, I won't. I'm a member of them because I won't vote for them again.
Okay, interesting.
No, I joined the party. I've paid me 25 quid.
Yeah.
I've got me an invite to the Christmas party. I even got an invite to stand as a councillor before the elections. I don't trust them. I think UKIP's the one for me.
Okay. Interesting thoughts there, Robert. Appreciate your thoughts. That's Robert in Hertfordshire with many opinions, including on us winding him up. Thank you, Robert. Really appreciate that. I don't want to. I'm going to say it right now. I'm going to mention my birthday for the last time in this programme. All I want to say is thank you to everybody who's been in touch. I'm not going to read out all your messages because it would just be incredibly self-indulgent to do that, but I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has got in touch. I'm going to read out two. One from Margaret and Lisa, who are really, really nice people from Birmingham, who say, happy birthday, hope you have a nice holiday. I'm going on holiday after today. I'm back on the 11th for the spending review. And Helena in Lincolnshire also says, many happy returns. Claude the Spaniel and myself want to wish you the loveliest of days. You bring a smile to my heart every day I hear you, and I always remember your kindness. Happy birthday, Peter, from Helena in Lincolnshire. What a lovely message. I won't read out any more of them, otherwise it'll all turn all a bit lovey-dovey. We're going to talk about, you know, I'm being sarcastic, and I really do appreciate so many people who've been in touch, but I'm going to mention it for the last time now and say just a big thank you. We're going to talk about vapes in a minute. Disposable vapes have been banned. Will this stop anybody actually using them? Guess what? There's a huge black market. Stay with us here on Talk.
Dogs are racist, according to the Welsh Labour Party. Deary me. Sorry. I can't help it. Apparently, that's breaking news. The economy has grown by 0.1%. I'm sorry, between July and September, according to the Office for National Statistics.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Grant Shapps, the former Defence Secretary, is going to be joining me in a few minutes' time. He's going to be telling me about the Strategic Defence Review. What do you think about this? Should we be arming planes with nuclear weapons? That's the proposal. Huge changes to the way we do things, and also we're going to be spending 3% of gross domestic product, what the country makes, we're going to be spending that on defence by 2034. Good idea? Bad idea? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Well, one thing the government is definitely doing is banning vapes, disposable vapes, and they have been banned since midnight last night. One person who is a vaper is Lucas DeGardis, who is from The Spectator, editorial manager there. Lucas, you're very welcome today. You are sceptical about this. Tell us your thoughts.
Thank you for having me on, Peter. Appreciate it. And I am. As someone who used to smoke cigarettes, roughly 10 to 15 a day, I've always wanted to quit, but was never quite sure how. And that's because I then discovered these disposable vapes. And naturally, I sort of came off of these vapes, and I came off of smoking cigarettes, and started smoking these vapes. And it was a very natural transition. And I ended up finding out that 3 million Brits had done the same. And I think people are not talking about the benefits these disposable vapes have had. I think it's the most effective cessation tool for cigarettes. And so there was a lot of...
It stopped you smoking?
It stopped me smoking, as it did people I know too. And I think many people are focused on the very ugly side of vapes, which I do sympathise with, and I share the concerns. You know, when you, for example, see those stickers on the bins in public.
I see that all the time. See those little stickers, they're on all the time. It's just as it's an eyesore, isn't it?
It is an eyesore, but then at the same time, I don't think this ban is going to change much, because the vapes that have now been rolled out, which do comply, are basically, to me, almost a replica of what we previously had.
So this was a policy, just to go back a bit, this was Rishi Sunak who said he wanted to ban disposable vapes, but you can have a vape that you recharge and you put, what do they call the little canister things into?
Yeah, the pre-filled pods.
Yes, the pods, yes, you can put those in. So you can spend 30 quid on one of those, but you can't spend about a £5 on a disposable vape. The whole idea of this, I mean, what is the point of this, or what are they saying is the point of this? To stop young people doing it because it's cheaper?
Yes, well, under Rishi Sunak, that was the idea. The idea was that there was actually this almost public health emergency of children picking up vapes. Now, that's despite that there is already a law which exists which prohibits the sale to minors. And I think if that was a real big issue, then they're looking at tackling the wrong thing entirely.
So just enforce the law?
Just enforce the law, quite right. So there was this big concern there, then it sort of dwindled under Keir Starmer, and he started pointing more to the environmental concerns. But my problem is, and as I looked at these vapes which are now compliant, I think the idea is that there is a chance this might help the environment if people reuse these reusable vapes. But the vapes I just managed to buy for £5, which was basically the same price for these non-compliant vapes, you can recharge them, but what is the point? I don't think there's enough incentive for people to go home and start recharging them.
So hold on, you buy it for £5, you use it, then you recharge it. I mean, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people are just going to say, why would I bother? I've been in the habit of spending about a £5 on a disposable vape. I'm just going to buy another one anyway.
Yes, and it also relies on people to have these disposable, these pre-filled pods at hand, ready for replacement. I just think it's a bit ridiculous to expect people will take that burden upon themselves when they can just walk into a shop and buy it for £5, already fully charged, with a pre-filled vape pod. I don't think it's going to
So you don't think this is going to make any difference?
No, I don't think it's going to make much difference. And I think whichever angle you're coming from, whether it's about protecting child health or whether it's protecting the environment, I don't think this ban will do much for either of those issues.
So the government has put a lot of time, effort, money into all of this. We also know that there's a big black market, isn't there?
There's a massive black market, and the government themselves have acknowledged about this market, because back in March they had announced £10 million extra funding to tackle these illicit vape sales. Now, this is a big issue because this new ban does not actually designate the imports of these vapes as illegal. So the sale of these...
Hold on, I'm lost here. So importing them is legal?
Yes.
Selling them is illegal?
Correct.
That's crackers.
So these vapes will have to go somewhere, and the only place they can go to is, of course, the black market, which is already a huge problem. So this government's just throwing extra funding, this money, at a problem which will likely exacerbate.
So they've changed the law, they've put a load of our taxpayers' money into it, they've said to people who are buying vapes, you can't buy them, you've got to buy them in a different way. And actually what they've done is made the problem worse. I mean, that's quite an achievement, really, isn't it?
It is an achievement. And there's also another concern with the vaping duty that's being proposed, and that's for next year, in October. And I think the figure is £2.20 per 10 mils of vaping fluid. Now, for context, those popular £5 vapes have 20 mils. So that would effectively be a vaping duty of £4.40. Which is basically almost the price of the vape
doubling
itself.
the price, yeah.
So for those actually trying to come off of smoking cigarettes by using these vapes, this time next year, and certainly by October, that incentive will be completely vanished, in my opinion.
People are not going to go back to cigarettes, though, are they? I mean, you go out and buy... I have a friend who smokes like a chimney. I went into a shop with her recently, £17 or £18, something like that, she spent on a pack of 20 cigarettes. People are not going to go back to cigarettes, are they, realistically? I think they might, and there's also a huge black market for cigarettes too. Yeah. And you can get cigarette packets, depending where you look, whether it's your local corner shop or Facebook Marketplace, for £5, £10 a pack. So I think that's still going to continue. And it's just taking away one of the most inexpensive and convenient ways for people to come off of smoking cigarettes. You say you're coming off smoking cigarettes, but vaping is not risk-free, is it? Do you wish you could stop vaping?
Yes, I do, but I think it's also very unrealistic to expect people to go cold turkey when quitting cigarettes. And actually, of course, a lot of the stuff we are still not sure about, the longer term effects of vaping. But with all the research that's out there, it's still very minute compared to the risk caused by smoking cigarettes. I mean, the carcinogens are found both in cigarettes and vapes, but we're talking about less than 1% harmful carcinogens released by vapes than by cigarettes. So yes, they're not risk-free, but I think we're not acknowledging just how wide the gap is in risk from vaping to smoking cigarettes.
I worked in government for 3.5 years. Not all laws work perfectly, but this one just sounds like a little bit of a disaster. Is there anything you think that has been done right in regard to this law?
No, I don't. I really think this is just a way to rally easy support from the public, because as we mentioned earlier, people can see themselves the effect
Look
vaping
at us,
has had.
we're saving your public health, we're saving the environment, aren't we marvellous? But
Yes. But actually, I do just think it's one of those uni-party policies that sounds fantastic, and it sounds like the government across benches is uniting in tackling something which should be. But when you look into those details, it really starts to fall apart.
Dr. Martin Holmes was my tutor at university. Holmes's law, if there is a consensus, it is wrong. If you have all politicians agreeing on something, they're wrong. Lucas, thank you very, very much indeed. Lucas DeGardis, who is editorial manager at The Spectator and The Vapor, appreciate that. You've written an article for The Spectator that is online. You can look at spectator.co.uk. Thanks for coming into the studio. Lots to discuss as we move into the final hour of the programme today. We've got Grant Shapps, who is the former Defence Secretary. He is going to be talking to us in just a minute's time. Do you think that the 10-year plan to get Britain ready for war will actually work? Well, he should have some perspective on this, but what do you think too? Let us know your thoughts.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday afternoon. There's loads to talk about. We've been talking about prisons and we're asking the question today, how do we fix the prison system? We spoke to Robert Jenrick earlier on. He is the Shadow Justice Secretary. He says the way to fix the system is to arm jail staff to stop Islamist attacks. He wants to give prison officers tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds to prevent their kidnap or murder by Islamist terrorists. What is the government doing? Well, it says that that's a bad idea. They're also talking about the Strategic Defence Review today. This is a huge deal. This is loads of our money. 3% of gross domestic product, what the country earns, will be, what the country makes, I should say, will be put into defence by 2034. We've got a former Defence Secretary standing by. Grant Shapps will tell us if he thinks it's a good idea. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We're also going to talk about Scottish grown tea. It's a really crazy story. That's a little bit later on in the programme. Tell us what you think on all the issues today. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note 0344 499 1000. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on that number or give me a ring on that number too. One more time, 0344 499 1000. Let's get started because there's loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Let me know your thoughts too. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, the Sunday Times has an exclusive report today. It says British fighter jets are to carry nuclear bombs. That is the main story in that paper, but it comes in light of the Strategic Defence Review. We've heard an awful lot about this. We've heard about troops. We've heard about accommodation for troops. Will they get better accommodation? We've heard about our capabilities, the threat from Russia, the threat from China. No better person to talk about this than Grant Shapps, who is the former Defence Secretary. He joins me now. Grant, good morning.
Morning. Or afternoon.
Afternoon, apologies. Yes, it is very much the afternoon. 4 minutes of it and everything. Grant, do you think that the proposed plans of the government through the Strategic Defence Review are good ones?
Yes. The problem is they've spent 12 months messing around, fiddling about, essentially pushing this all off into the distance, I think at Treasury requests, before coming to the right set of decisions, broadly speaking, from what we know. So I think it's the right thing to do. It's just a shame that they've delayed it for 12 months, in which time they've gone on to do other very bizarre things like give away our sovereignty in those Chagos Islands.
Let's talk about that in just a second, Grant, but what I want to do now is just play a very brief clip of your successor, or one of your successors, John Healey, the current Defence Secretary. This is what he told Sky News this morning.
When are these factories going to be in production?
Well, the detail of where they are and when they come
it's not detail.
We'll follow, but you...
Mr Putin's watching this. He wants to know, should he be frightened now? Should he be frightened in 2030? Should he be frightened in 2040? What are we talking about?
Yeah, look, the message to Putin is we take our defence seriously. We're stepping up our deterrence. We should expect to see new factories opening very soon. And we've already got strong munitions factories in every part of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The investment we're making will boost the jobs in those areas as well.
3% of GDP, Grant, is what they want to put in here in regard to, by 2034, the Labour government is committing to that. 3% of what the country makes. That is a lot of money and represents a significant uplift to what was put in under the Conservatives for 14 years and previously. Is that the right approach, especially when we're in a cost of living crisis? There's so many other things that are demanding taxpayer money all the time to get fixed.
So it's always very tempting to say the money should be spent somewhere else. But the truth is, if we don't have our liberty and our freedom, in other words, if we've literally been invaded and taken over, none of those other things matter. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. We need to spend more money now on defence. I was saying it as Defence Secretary. I was saying it before I was Defence Secretary. And I think we have to accept the situation has changed. When we were first, if you want to go back 14 years in power, China was a golden era. Russia, we were in the G8, so in the group of the most developed nations. Obviously, all of that's changed, and the defence budget has to change alongside that.
How do you assess the threat? We're told that Russia is the big one, of course, but China is not seen as big a threat, and particularly in regard to China. Tell us your thoughts on Russia and Ukraine, of course, but perhaps you'll let us know what you think about China as well, because so many different countries, especially the UK, have got to make a decision really about China, because it's there, it exists, it's a thing, it's a massive economic power. We've got to engage with it in some way. But what's the best way in terms of keeping our defence which we guard so incredibly seriously?
Well, look, I think the way we deal with Russia and the way we deal with China is different. Russia, we can have as many of these defence reviews, which, as I've said, is pointlessly wasted a year to tell us what we already know as you like. But the only thing Moscow will respond to has to be forged in steel, not in PowerPoint presentations. So that's Russia, and we know because they are an aggressor here in Europe. They're at war in Europe, not far from us right now. China, on the other hand, is a country that we have massive trade with, and that will concern many of us, particularly where it gets into areas of our own critical infrastructure. And I was, as a minister, responsible for booting them out of one of those areas with the Newport wafer fab. That's a microchip factory. But they are also an economic reality. They are a vast part of the world economy, and they're also not invading Europe right now. So our approach needs to be very clear to Moscow, as I say, forged in steel. But to China, they need to understand that we will, in the longer run, always protect our own sovereignty and our way of life, because we're not interested in single party rule, no matter who that is. And as far as the Chinese leaders are concerned, that is their only approach. Well, that's fine for the Chinese Communist Party. It's not fine for much of the West, and certainly the United Kingdom. So we do have to be prepared to spend more of our money on defence, and I'm afraid 3% won't be enough. We need to go above 4% again.
We know, of course, that this is a major, there are lots of changes, lots of things. We have a lot of detail in regard to the Strategic Defence Review, but we won't have the whole thing until tomorrow. And it would be unfair for me to say what exactly is it going to do. But in general, Grant, I just wonder what you think and what you would say to the many veterans, to the many military families, people who really care about the military, who think that our boys and girls who, put their lives on the line for us and really a lot of the time aren't particularly paid particularly well. A lot of their accommodation isn't very good. There are many people who think that veterans aren't dealt with particularly well in this country, and they may talk about your party's record on that. I don't particularly want to get into that. What I want to say is, in future, do you think that this Strategic Defence Review will not only make the country safer, but will help people who do put their lives on the line, who do serve in our armed forces, and their families?
Well, first of all, I think they are the most important people in all of this. The strength of our military, and it's often rather underplayed. We're actually the biggest spender in NATO outside of America, right? We are the only country in Europe that protects with a nuclear umbrella all other NATO members through what's called Article 5. But the people, those are they are the real key, the men and women who serve. And there are definitely elements to this defence review that, as the current Defence Secretary's predecessor, I was his immediate predecessor, I strongly welcome. Why? Well, because we were already set off in this direction. We were already trying to sort out the accommodation, and this government has continued with it. I can see other elements where this defence review will continue that work. It's a pity that the defence review simply delayed what was already happening for a year, but it would be churlish not to say I then don't welcome the things that are in there. I think they will improve the lives of the men and women who fight for this country or put themselves up to fight for this country, to whom we owe an enormous debt. So I think it's in the right direction. I think the problem is that there's too much of what this government does that isn't, including handing away the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. They
say, of course, Grant, that principle, the legal principle, was actually conceded under the Conservatives.
Total tosh. And I've seen them say a lot of things, including that they've seen secret, briefings that show them they have to do this. Absolute nonsense. I had exactly the same.
Just to be clear, sorry to interrupt you, but just to be clear, Grant, you're saying there is no intelligence reason that we're not being told in regard to the Chagos Islands, because the government have told us that on numerous occasions. That's not true?
Worse than that, I think they are misusing the intelligence to try to pull the wool over people's eyes. Yes, there are intelligence elements, and I can tell you broadly what they are. Things like international communication agreements around the islands and things like that. But the idea that because an advisory ruling by the International Court of Justice that the Americans don't even recognize and are not members of, but are the ones actually primarily using Diego Garcia, and that meant that we should pay so much attention to it that we should not only give away our assets to Mauritius, a country 2,000 kilometers away who've never owned it in the first place, but also pay them with British taxpayers' money for the privilege, is incompetence beyond belief. But worse than that, it's also a failure to understand the British security and defence needs. And so, you know, a week later, we've got this strategic defence review coming out with things, as I say, I welcome in it. I don't welcome the fact they delayed them for a year, but I welcome the things that are in that report. Unfortunately, it comes against a backdrop of a government that fundamentally doesn't understand the meaning of defence and security to this country. Otherwise, it wouldn't give away our global defence assets in that way.
Grant, it's really good to talk to you, and thank you for your insight. I just want to ask you one more question, and it's actually about you. You lost your seat at the last election, as many Conservatives did. The Conservatives are doing quite badly, 16% in polls at the moment. But are you perhaps firing up the spreadsheet, plotting a political return?
Well, actually, I spend a lot of time on the front line of politics and doing many different jobs. I think actually the most jobs of anybody who's alive and sat round the cabinet table in different roles.
You were Home Secretary for 6 days or something, weren't you?
I was at about 6 days, the shortest in history, but many other.
Did you find the lose?
For much longer. So I certainly got the experience. Look, I mean, I'm really enjoying the sort of time off, decompressing, if you like, from what was a pretty intense period as we went through things like COVID and Brexit and many other things. Of course, interest in politics doesn't just dissipate when you are not in it on a day-to-day basis. But I'm catching up with my family. My kids have never known me to be anything other than an MP all of their lives. So it's actually quite nice to be able to sort of reconnect with them as well. I don't rule out returning at some point. And, you know, obviously it's pretty disturbing to see the way that things are going, particularly given the mess the current government's making, not least over things like those Chagos arrangements that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
My interest isn't dented, but I'm thoroughly enjoying having a bit of a reboot, if you like.
The first politician I ever did work experience for is an Ulster Unionist called Danny Kennedy, still my friend after 20 years, and he said to me at that stage, politics is addictive and there's no known cure. Grant, thank you very much indeed.
You might be right.
Yes, I think so. Grant Shapps there, the former Defence Secretary. Philip Ingram, MBE, is a former senior military intelligence officer, listening to that interview. Philip, what do you make of what Grant Shapps is saying and also what John Healey is saying? Is this Strategic Defence Review going to magically solve all the problems that the MOD have?
Well, I can answer that easily. That's no. There are so many problems that have been there for such a long period of time. Let's look at the housing announcement, which I welcome enormously, because the housing accommodation for our service personnel is appalling. But the last Labour government promised similar sorts of money to do it, and nothing happened. And every government since has done it, and nothing's happened. And we're getting this Strategic Defence Review by a series of piecemeal press releases before the statements made in the House of Commons. And they tend to give the good news so that they can bury the bad news. There's some good stuff in what we're hearing, but most of it asks or gets me asking more questions.
And what should those questions be? What are the questions that remain?
Well, the first bit is the biggest one. You know, what is defence there to do? You know, the government has to define what it wants the Minister of Defence to do on behalf of the country, our foreign policy, our position in the world. And therefore, Strategic Defence Review needs to start and be integrated as part of a national security strategy. And that's not being published for another 2 weeks or so. It's coming the wrong way round. And what that national security strategy should do is define the important questions of what it wants defence to do, where it wants it to do it, how big it anticipates defence's response needs to be to anything, how long it needs to be able to sustain itself for, and how many different operations it's doing simultaneously. If you haven't got that, you haven't got the foundation to build up, the desire for the number of missiles and drones and tanks and aircraft and ships and everything else that you need. So you have to put that definition in place. Otherwise, you're just clutching at sound bites that sound popular.
I'm not sure talking about 3% of GDP means that much to many people. It certainly doesn't mean very much to me, because GDP, what the country makes, gross domestic product, I mean, that even as a concept, I have issue with. I don't really know what that means. I do know what it means, but I also don't know what it means. But 3% of that is many, many billions of pounds.
Yeah.
That is, I just wonder, is that enough, and is that correct that we should do that, that we should put 3% of every pound that this country makes into defence specifically? It's an awful lot of money, especially when people are talking about welfare, people are talking about winter fuel allowances within that, people are talking about housing, the NHS, all the rest of it. Grant Shapps says, well, you've got to have defence of the realm. But, I mean, we've had at least defence of the realm. We haven't had a military invasion by another country, shall we say, for some time. And that's been without the 3% there. So what would you say to that question? And also, if you believe 3% is enough, how would you persuade people to say, actually, that is something we need to seriously think about and do?
Well, two things. We have been invaded, and we're being invaded on a daily basis. We just don't see it because our intelligence agencies, our security organisations and all the rest of it are doing everything they can to mitigate the effects against the normal person in the UK so they can go about their daily lives.
That is a brilliant point, Philip. That is a really, really good point. I hadn't considered that. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, to mitigate that costs an awful lot of money. Now, what we're trying to do is stop it then getting into what's happened to Ukraine, where it turns into a shooting war. And the only way to stop that, given the growth that there are of threat actors around the world with Russia, Iran, North Korea, China and others, is to have a capability that turns around and says, hey, you come to us and we're going to hurt you more than you can hurt us. And that's a big stick. And that's our military. That's our conventional military. And that big stick is backed up by an even bigger stick, our nuclear capability. And we are in one of the unique positions, but about 1.5% of our defence expenditure, our GDP is spent on our nuclear deterrent, and that means there's a smaller amount that's available for our conventional forces. We need an uplift in conventional forces. We need to get that stick that demonstrates to the likes of Vladimir Putin, who's not going away, and his potential successors could be worse, that they cannot just go and take countries or bits of countries when they feel like it. And we haven't got that. During the Cold War, when that threat was there, and it was a linear threat, the West against the East, we were spending 5 to 6% of GDP on defence. And then if that money is invested back in the UK, our own defence manufacturing, it's good investment, creates jobs, creates more tax revenue. Is 3% enough? No.
Philip, thank you. Great sense as always, and that point about being invaded already, that's I'm going to be thinking about that for many hours to come, so appreciate your insight there. Philip Ingram there, Philip Ingram MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of issues. We've got some voice notes as well we're going to play after the break, but let me read a couple of messages first. Lynn says, morning Peter, regarding the boat illegals, surely now DNA can pretty much identify the village you come from, certainly the country. If they get granted leave to remain or more, they should be required to provide an identity document before they can be granted British nationality. My friend happened to be born in India in a local hospital. Her father was a British soldier. Because she had an Indian BC, sorry, I don't know what that means, she had to prove 3 generations of Britishness. Born in the UK, I still have to provide my nationality to get a passport, says Lynn. Thank you to Sean in Gloucester, who says, good morning and happy birthday. Thank you, Sean. I'm absolutely incandescent. The Tories were useless and had no intention of sorting illegal immigration, but Keith Stalin and his cronies have supercharged the problem. It's getting to the point where any normal, decent people in this country should emigrate and leave these lunatics to it. Can someone explain to me why people call him Keith Starmer? I've always found that kind of interesting as to why. I mean, I know it's a joke on his name and his name's Keir, but why Keith? I don't really understand that. And we get it quite a lot. On the prisons, Don in Chelmsford says, morning Peter, it occurs to me that the prison governors could stop drugs from getting into prison. I often wonder if it is easier to let prisoners use drugs to keep them quiet, says Don in Chelmsford. Don, you're absolutely right, it is. Getting drugs into prison, honestly, some of the ways they get them in, I don't really want to go into at this time of the day. But one of the things that just absolutely, when I was working in the Ministry of Justice, I was told this. I was shown it. I was actually shown it when I went into Belmarsh. What happens? This is absolutely correct. So spice, you may be familiar with spice. Spice it costs £1, £2. It's something you can smoke. It gets you completely zombie-like. It is a horrendous drug. It is illegal. It's awful. Never take it. It's highly addictive. Do not take spice. Run away from it. It is a horrible, horrible thing. Many people, both inside and outside prisons, are on it. inside prisons, spice is in huge demand because you can basically spend the whole day in a zombie-like status, and it feels like you're not doing a day in prison, right? It's a horrible thing, but that's what some prisoners want to do. Do you know how they get it in sometimes? Not all the time, but somehow how they get it in. Children's drawings, right? Prisoner gets sent a drawing by his or her child. Often it's just a couple of lines on the page. It's abstract. Do you know what it is? It's a piece of A4 paper that has been saturated with spice. What happens is that prisoner, or whoever is controlling that prisoner, cuts it up, sells it on, makes a load of money out of it. Seriously, this is the ways they do it. Drones, other ways I'm not going to talk about at this time of the day. Let me tell you something. It's a serious problem, to say nothing of some, not all, but some officers who are completely corrupt. Final message before the break comes from Mary in County Down, talking about what I was saying earlier about Britain being full. Is Britain full? To say that Britain technically has room in terms of land mass is fatuous. Migrants aren't going to live in the Cairngorms or Exmoor. There is no room, or rather a severe shortage of rooms in our cities and large towns, a severe shortage of capacity in our health and education services, a severe shortage of financial resources in our local authorities. So it is true to say there is no room. What do you think of all this? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to take some of your voice notes in just a second.
These people are part of the HR network. They are specialists who deal with equality. They will advise on policy. They will help support HR when it comes to complex and difficult cases. That's the sort of work that they're doing. You're talking about 500 people out of an organisation of more than 500,000 that are working on this particular area. It is not extraordinary. All big organisations, private sector and public sector, will have HR experts and equality experts to help ensure that the best people get on in an organisation and an organisation treats its staff fairly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Amanda, who says the images of overflowing rubber dinghies heading our way brings to mind the saying of rats deserting a sinking ship, but now they're heading towards a sinking ship. Worrying times. Stuart says, I assume there were French fishing boats used to bring the illegal immigrants to Britain and they are giving greater access to British fishing rights. Barry says France is the immediate enemy, not Russia. They're complicit in this country being invaded. I wonder what you think, Barry. First of all, I think that's a really fair point, but I wonder what you make of what Philip Ingram said there about the fact that the invasion is already here, not just in regard to illegal immigrants, and Barry's point is a very well made one, but in terms of the fact that, you know, Russia, China, they don't have to be here physically. It's about hacking our systems and stopping things happening and all the rest of it. It's a fascinating point. I want to talk about prisons. Prisons are our main story today. I know a bit about it, as you know, and it's an issue which is of real interest to me. I can honestly say when I was in government, it was the most interesting bit of my job that I did. I did a number of jobs, the most interesting bit, and this is the story of Robert Jenrick. He wants prison officers armed with tasers, stun grenades and baton rounds. Loads of people have been in touch on this, far more people than on any other story today. I want to play a few voice notes on it. Firstly from Kelvin.
Don't you think that Britain's become the new Rwanda plan? You know, except we are paying France to send them all here to us. You know, I think we are the new Rwanda, aren't we? You know, it's just all getting pear-shaped. Anyway, have a good day. Bye.
Kelvin, thanks. Kate has some thoughts on this as well.
Morning, Peter. It's Kate from Leeds. I left the prison service working under the NHS and then a private company in 2019. Prior to that, you know, the prison service was good because it employed lots of ex-army, ex-forces people. Then the greedy Conservative government, you know, wanted to get rid of the good officers, what were paid a decent wage, and employ these young people who haven't got any life experience whatsoever. And this is a problem now. But nobody has got any life experience, and they're going in and working with the most horrendous people going. So I could say a lot more, but obviously I won't. But good show anyway. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Kate. Really good to get that first-hand perspective. Really appreciate that. And Kelvin's note as well. Let's hear another one from Anna.
Good morning, Peter. It's Anna, sorry. Starmer's distraction tactics with nuclear arms, prisons, whatever, it's all part of a bigger problem. The British people have done exactly what we're supposed to do. We voted in 2016. We voted for Boris. We do everything we're supposed to do, and they do everything to make our lives more difficult, Peter. We've said no immigration for years. They've neutered our police, they've neutered our prison service, and they're trying to neuter our voices. I feel at the minute that probably 50 million British people have been pushed into a corner, and I'm afraid I feel that the only thing left for us now is force, because I don't think the country's going to take a further 3 years of this. I do feel that we have no choice but to enter into some sort of civil war with our own government, unless Keir can a miracle. Please ask Sarah Potchin what she feels. Bye-bye.
Anna, thanks for your note. Sorry we didn't play that before we spoke to Sarah Potchin, but we just didn't have time. Potchin is how you pronounce it. Potchin, like a poached egg, I've been told. Anna, she's Sarah Potchin. Anna left the voice message. Anna, I don't want there to be a civil war. I don't want anybody to do anything that's illegal. I don't want anybody to take up arms. I don't want anybody to do anything that's not, you know, civilly, you know, legal, first of all, or some element of civil disobedience. We can protest, we can make our voice heard. And I you know, there's something changing out there. There's something changing. I've been in this chair for 4.5 years, and I can honestly tell you that the tide is turning. You know, it's not just about Reform UK, it is a bit, but politically things are different. People are just not accepting the same things as they did before. And I totally understand your frustration, Anna, because I hear it from so many people and I share it myself. I am politically homeless. I'm not a member of the Conservative Party anymore. I haven't been for years, actually. I worked for them. I worked for the government. But I honestly, I'm not entirely sure how I would vote now. I need to really think about it. I know a load of viewers and listeners are Reform UK supporters. That's grand. That's absolutely fine. And, you know, that's okay. And I'm certainly convinced by some of their arguments, maybe not all of them. But it is just one of those things where I think things are changing, and I wouldn't give up hope in terms of the message getting through. Sometimes it takes a long time, and, you know, Anna makes a perfectly valid point there. The Conservatives, for example, were told hold on a second, we don't want illegal immigration. We want to get immigration in general down. In 2010, they said, we're going to do that. They didn't do it. 2015, they said, we're going to do it. Okay, all right, maybe we'll give you another chance. Okay, fair enough. They didn't do it. 2017, we're going to get immigration down. Okay, well, the last 2 times you said it, you haven't done it. So why should we believe you now? Okay, we'll give Theresa May, you know, a bit of a chance. You know, it was really tight and Corbyn didn't quite win. And obviously, Theresa May had a lack of a majority, had to go into a confidence and supply agreement. But nonetheless, we'll give you a bit of a chance. 2019, huge chance to Boris Johnson to save these things. We're going to take back control. We're going to sort it all out. It didn't happen. Here we are 5 years later with a Labour government that is saying they want to smash the gangs. I haven't heard a single person on today, or actually really, apart from government ministers, in any other show that I've done that says, do you know what, Labour, yeah, they've got a great plan. They're going to sort it out. It's going to be fine. I just don't think it's going to happen. It'll be really interesting to see, under Labour anyway, but it'll be interesting to see what happens next. This is a fascinating time in our country. It's a very frustrating time, but it's a fascinating time too. James in Salford says, love the show, really goes along at a great pace. James, you're absolutely right. It's a privilege to do this every single day. It's hard to believe I've been sitting here for 2.5 hours. It just doesn't, it feels like about 5 minutes. I am slowly losing faith in Nigel Farage. He is morphing into Boris. The only chance Nigel's got is the support he would probably get from President Trump. I think Donald Trump would back him and reform against the bloated EU establishment. Regards, James in Salford. Again, really interesting stuff. We're getting, it's sort of, there are quite a few people getting in touch, often former Reform supporters, saying that they're not too sure about Nigel Farage. That's a very interesting thing that's happening as well, especially in light of, you know, huge victory for them just a few weeks ago. Russell in Shrewsbury says, if all these illegals want to stay here, make them build the infrastructure in return for bed and board. Only then, when that particular scheme is finished, will they be eligible to stay. Here is one that just, my heart sinks when I read this, honestly. My daughter is a housing officer. She wears a knife collar when visiting clients' houses, so I can't see the problem with prison officers wearing similar personal protective equipment. That's a perfectly valid point. That is a perfectly reasonable point, and thank you for it to whoever it was who sent it. No name on it. But just the first bit, my daughter is a housing officer. She wears a knife collar when visiting clients' houses. Britain, 2025. Let's talk about migration and get a couple of voice notes on that. Here's what Tony has to say.
Hi Peter, Tony from Bradford here. I just want to say, my blood is boiling. What's going on with this country? You know, they say common sense can predict the future. Well, every day records are being broken with these illegal immigrants coming over, filling the hotels and now even filling the housing. You know, we're getting rent-free doctors, free phones, taxis, football tickets. What's going on? And you know what's going to happen once these hotels are full? All the housing is destroyed for the normal people who's been waiting years to get on the housing list, like my niece, yeah? This country, the economy is going to be destroyed. We need to stop this now, because in 4 years' time, it's going to be too late. Once Nigel Farage gets in power, OK, he can stop it, but it'll be too late by then. It needs to be stopped now. We're just walking into a minefield, blindfolded with this socialist horrible government, and also pushing this net zero that's going to do nothing for this country.
Tony, I just think you speak for so many people. Thank you for that voice note. I'm sorry you're angry, but I totally understand it. Matt's been in touch on the over 1,000 migrants who arrived yesterday. This is what
Peter,
Matt says.
Matt in Hove here. Just a quick note on the 1,200 illegal migrants that arrived yesterday from Calais on small boats. That's 4 full-up city centre hotels that have got 10 or 12 floors. Let that sink in. 4 full hotels. And the worst thing is, we're picking up the tab for the hotel. Not just the numbers, we're also picking up the tab and giving them new clothes and a mobile and 45 quid and 3 meals a day. It is absolutely bonkers. The benefits that anyone that comes here illegally have to stop. End of.
Bang on, Matt. Can't disagree with a word of that. One more before the break. Sean on defence.
Morning, Peter. Sean from Grimsby here. Keir Starmer says that we need to be prepared for war, yet we live in a country where we can't even defend our own borders. The vast majority of people in this country can't even fire a rifle. And as an ex-army man myself, who can actually fire a rifle, there'd be no chance on this earth that I'd fight for Keir Starmer. Absolute zero, mate. Great show, by the way, Peter. Love having you on, mate.
Sean, thank you, and thank you for your service to our country as well. 1,194 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. That's the exact total. And just that, I mean, first of all, load of common sense spoken in so many of those messages, and thank you. And I think it was Matt's message where he talked about the hotels, the one just before Sean there. 4 full hotels yesterday. Yesterday alone, one day. What do we do next, honestly? This is crazy. I want to get more of your opinions on the air in the next 22 minutes. I also want to talk about something maybe can put a smile on our face. This is a bizarre story. It's about a fraudster who made £500,000 selling fake Scottish grown tea. Not many laughs, of course, of the people who bought it, but some of the detail of this story is just utterly mad. Stay with us here on Talk and you'll get all the details.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, I want to tell you a story now. Hopefully it'll put a smile on your face now. Not for the people who were taken in or duped by this guy, but this is a fraudster who tricked luxury hotels and stores into buying Scottish grown tea that was grown abroad. He's been found guilty of a £500,000 scam. Thomas Robinson supplied high-end customers such as Edinburgh's Balmoral Hotel and the Dorchester Hotel in London. A cup of tea there, I can tell you, cost a pretty penny. And varieties with names like Highland Green, Silver Needles and Scottish Antlers tea. Trading as the Wee Tea Plantation, he claimed they'd be grown in farmland in Perthshire. Instead, the tea had been imported, repackaged and then resold at hugely inflated prices, according to well, Falkirk Sheriff Court was told. One expert says a kilo of top tea from Africa could be sold for 100 times the cost if passed off as Scottish. Thomas O'Brien, interesting character, 55 years old. Prosecutors said he created the CV of a fantasist, claiming among other things that he was a multi-millionaire, a polymer scientist, a former bomb disposal expert, and had invented the bag for life. Sorry, I'm struggling to keep it together here. He also claimed to have developed a special biodegradable polymer that would make the tea plants grow in half the usual time. The court said it was told it looked like a black bin liner. Robinson's false claim that our Scottish grown teas come from gardens in our farming heartland in Perthshire and Dumfries and Galloway was reprinted on the Balmoral Hotel's Palm Court luxury tea menu. He boasted that the tea supplied to London's Dorchester Hotel was the Queen's favourite. The media was taken in. He appeared on a BBC podcast. Shocking, given that the BBC usually check things so incredibly thoroughly. Right then, Professor Chris Elliott is founder of International Food Security. Chris, where do you even start with this? I mean, this is a fascinating story. First of all, you can grow tea in Scotland. That is possible.
No, I mean, I agree with you. It does sound a bit crazy. It sounds quite bonkers. But this we describe as food fraud, and it manifests itself in many, many different ways. I mean, I play a game with some of my students, name any type of food commodity, I'll give you a fraud associated with it.
Avocado.
Avocado. So there's a wonderful, or quite, well, difficult tale about what are called blood avocados. And that is basically the avocado industry in Central America, particularly in Mexico, has been taken over by drug cartels. And they're perpetrating massive frauds across the world with avocado. So I'd say good try, but total failure.
Can I do one more? Chocolate biscuits.
Chocolate biscuits, okay. So think about the ingredients, okay. And do you know that one of the commodities in real shortage in the world now is cocoa? Cocoa used to make chocolate. So there is far more things being added to our chocolate now than you would ever imagine. A lot of the dairy, the fats have been taken out, and different types of oils have been added to it.
Okay.
So there's lots of economic drivers there. So we could play the game all day.
You've succeeded on 2 occasions, and I think you've proven your spurs on this. Although the fact you're a professor is probably part of it as well. You never know, Chris. After all that academic study, how could this person get away with this? I mean, there's a lot we don't know about food. There's a lot that people are really interested in different aspects of food. They want to know the origin of it and so on. But are we just too gullible? Were these hotels perhaps gullible, believing that this was a really special tea when actually it was just probably fairly normal tea that had been souped up and repackaged?
What I would have done is think about, is it climatically possible to grow tea in Scotland? And the answer is yes, possibly, but with huge difficulty and with great expense. And you wouldn't be able to do it in volume. That would be the first thing that would kind of worry me. The second thing is growing tea is one thing. Actually getting that nice black fermented tea is another topic. You have to be an expert in processing of tea leaves. And you kind of think, that's all being done in India or Sri Lanka or in Africa. Has he set up these specialist facilities? So there should have been plenty of warning signs there, to be honest with you. And I mean, I've known about this case for quite a few years, actually, really, really complicated. But he does seem to be an absolute con man, you know, and could basically fool anybody into anything because he was just good at that. But, you know, I would think in terms of the people who bought this tea, too much naivety, to be honest with you. They didn't really check their facts. And I think, you know, another thing that this con man did was he tried to convince some Scottish farmers to actually grow the tea. And he imported some tea plants, sold them to them for quite a large amount of money. And hey ho, they all died within a couple of weeks.
The plants, obviously. Yeah. Chris, it's an astonishing story. What would you say, just finally, to someone who sees something, thinks that's a really intriguing story, but you're about to pay an awful lot of money for really any food stuff? You've got to engage your critical faculties, don't you? You've got to ask the questions and find out a little bit more than what you're told.
Always my first piece of advice, Peter, is it too good to be true? In most cases, fraud are too good to be true. You're getting something, you know, absolute premium for a reduced cost, and then there's generally a reason for that. It could be stolen, or the whole tale about where it came from is totally false. So buy from reputable sources, buy local when you possibly can, and the last thing you should ever do is go on the internet and buy food off it, unless it's from a registered food business operator.
Are you speaking to me from Belfast, Chris? Is that where you are at the moment?
I'm in a much better place than Belfast. I live in Antrim, and I can tell from your accent you come from not too far away.
Armagh, yes. The next time I'm in Antrim, maybe I'll buy you a cup of tea. Chris, thank you very much. That's Chris Elliott there, Professor Chris Elliott, founder of International Food Security. Lots more to discuss in the programme. Plenty of calls and messages. We'll go through those. We'll get your thoughts, including those of DJB, who says about planes carrying nuclear bombs. This is nothing new. The UK had the Vulcan carrying nuclear bombs in the late 1950s. And Colleen says, morning, hi Peter. Starmer hasn't lost control over the migrant crisis. He never had control. More of your opinions coming up very shortly here on Talk.
These people are part of the HR network. They are specialists who deal with equality. They will advise on policy. They will help support HR when it comes to complex and difficult cases. That's the sort of work that they're doing. You're talking about 500 people out of an organisation of more than 500,000 that are working on this particular area. It is not extraordinary. All big organisations, private sector and public sector, will have HR experts and equality experts to help ensure that the best people get on in an organisation and an organisation treats its staff fairly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sarah's been in touch with a voice note. No, she hasn't.
Good morning, Peter. Sarah from Coventry. A great show as always. I'm calling in because my daughter is a prison officer currently. She's actually a trained tornado. She did 12 weeks of training and she can put a man down despite only being 5'5".
Wow, she sounds great. The tornadoes are like an elite force in the prison service. Basically, if there's a really, really big incident, if there's a riot in a prison or something, the tornadoes are sent in. They are the best of the best. So Sarah, I'm sure you're a very, very proud mum, and thank you to your daughter for everything she does. It is a really tough job, and although she may be small in stature, I absolutely would not be messing with her. Adam has been in touch on prisons as well.
Hi Peter, this is Adam from Bournemouth. The thing is with these prisons, the softer we get on people, this is what happens. People take advantage of soft. Unless we punish these guys properly and have a proper system that actually works because they are called criminals need to be punished. Until we do that, Peter, nothing's going to change. This softy approach clearly doesn't work because it's chaos. Anyway, Peter, thanks for a great show, mate.
Adam, thank you, and thank you for your message. Can I just ask people, listen, I want to be on Talk as much as possible. I'd do 24 hours a day if I could, but if you just turn me down when you're recording your voice note, that would be great, because sometimes people don't, and we just want it nice and clear. And we do have lots of lovely viewers and listeners whose hearing is not entirely brilliant, so we just want to make things as clear as possible. So just if you could turn me down. But Adam, thanks for your voice note. Please send me one anytime with the sound turned down. Betty's been in touch and says the Tories consistently reduced the armed forces in hopes that the Yanks would bail them out. Cameron butchered the Army and Navy. Shaps beached the Marines by selling their ships. The MOD is only interested in their pensions. Stuart says 3% of GDP on defence, not enough. We need 5%, the same amount as we spent during the Cold War, to stop it going from to a hot war. Paul in York says, I served 33 years in the prison service. I am of the opinion that due to the very poor vetting and staff retention, organised crime groups are employing people to join the service for their own aims. I don't want to be trivial about this, Paul. First of all, great point. I don't want to be trivial about that, but that's basically what happened in the TV show Line of Duty in the police, where they got a guy to go into the police and then be corrupt with inside it. And I mean, it's a drama, it's fictional, but nonetheless, I think what you're saying there is fact in regard to the prison. There's evidence of that, and you, of course, know absolutely what you're talking about after 33 years in the prison service. I want to talk to Sandy in Suffolk now. Sandy's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sandy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you.
I wanted to say the instant solution to the overcrowding in prisons would be something that could be implemented almost immediately if one had the political will. And that is, next week, get a load of planes and start deporting foreign criminals that are in prison. I heard you, Peter, say earlier that if one of these foreign criminals went back to their country of origin and then committed a crime in that foreign country, how would we feel if we had that on our conscience? I don't think that should be on our conscience.
Mm-hmm.
That should be on the conscience of the leaders of that country.
Yeah.
Our conscience should only be concerned with the people in this country.
I suppose it's not just quite about a conscience, though, Sandy. It's also how victims would feel. It's also, you know, if something, God forbid, something dreadful happened, or there's a murder of someone in a family, or a rapist, or just some dreadful thing that has happened, and just when someone's given a sentence, the hurt, I know from talking to so many people in this programme who've been victims of crime, it doesn't just stop then. That continues, and if someone were to be repatriated and then not served the whole time, or part of the time, or no time at all, that's something I just think, I don't think it's the biggest thing, but I think it's just one element that we have to consider in this, Sandy. What do you think?
I think my concern is with the people in this country and how our tax is spent. I don't think you or anybody else should be concerning yourself with a foreign offender committing or re-offending back in the country they were repatriated to.
But I want them to serve their time, Sandy. I want them to serve their time.
Yeah, there's lots of things I want, Peter, but they're not realistic, are they?
Okay.
I'd like a unicorn at the bottom of my garden. It's not going to happen. We have to be realistic, and we have to do what's best for this country.
Yeah.
There's too many people that are thinking how we look on the world stage. It's time we stopped caring how we looked on the world stage.
Okay.
It's time we considered the people in this country.
Thank you, Sandy. Great points there. I'm just going to have to leave it there just for time reasons, but you make some excellent points. Ian has been in touch and has a voice note. Let's see what Ian has to say here.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. I think Robert Jenrick needs to reassess his situation. The people who are forcing Starmer to change tack is Reform. Reform's 5 MPs are doing more to actually hold Labour to account and dictate policy than the Tories will ever do. Doesn't matter what Jenrick says or Badenoch says, they're a busted flush.
Ian, I largely agree with you, although I think Robert Jenrick has made a lot of noise and some very good points this week as well, in regard, especially in regard to his video, 15 million people. But I maintain the point I said earlier, which I think agrees with your point, which is that Nigel Farage had more effect on Britain and British politics from Las Vegas than Kemi Badenoch did sitting in London this week. Darren has been in touch on prisons.
Morning, Peter. Darren from Suffolk. Whitemore, Woodhill, Belmarsh, Sutton, Franklin. Why aren't we talking to all these governors, putting them all in a room and asking them what the solution is? These people are running the prisons. Let's find out. How can a drone drop a knife off? Where are the security watching the perimeter when these people are outside having their exercise? It's not rocket science. The solutions are out there. Let's ask the people in the know, not just guess.
I think that's a really good point, Darren. My worry is they're running the prisons. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know how to solve this. Or maybe they do know, but they're not getting the backing they need, which is so often the case when I speak to people who are still in the prison service. Stephen is in Manchester, has been in touch on defence. Stephen, we're pretty tight for time. Let me squeeze you in before the top of the end of the show. What would you like to say?
I'd like to say, with regard to motivating people to defend these islands, what is there left to defend in many people's eyes? They look at the landscape. If you look at 1939, when men marched off to war, they were defending a very definitive, clearly defined nation, strong families, significant birth rates, traditional British culture. It's all been undermined and degraded progressively over the last 60 years. We're a nation now that idly stands by whilst our birth rates disappear into the dust. There's over 200,000 abortions a year. Family is fragmented as a concept. We've got mass immigration uncontrolled. We can't control our borders. Many of the landscapes of the cities are alien, and dishevelled, occupied by foreigners. What are we defending here?
It's a very, very good point, Stephen, and I think a lot of people will agree with you. I, for one, am still proud of my country, but I want it to be a heck of a lot better than it is. Stuart says the ECHR is not the whole solution to deporting illegal migrants. Other countries deport them, while within the ECHR, the problem is also the lefty, wokey judges who need to be removed. And Andy in Morecambe says, my stepson bought 3 of the rechargeable vapes yesterday, and I said, why do you need 3 if they're rechargeable? He replies, because you can't refill them. So I said, they are disposable vapes. He said, no, because you can't recharge it. But what's the point if you can't refill them? Sorry, is it me? Great show, says Andy. Andy, I appreciate that, and I think that vapes debate that we talked about a little bit earlier is going to go on. Final one from Sue in Macclesfield. The UK is France's Rwanda. They're not going to stop them. Why would they, if it is in their interest to assist these people as it gets them off their land? It is disgraceful and nothing is being done. I've joined Reform. I am terrified of the